Hey, the pavetta rifle. Drop the gun! Oh, shit! I'm hit. I'm okay. But I'm not gonna die.
At all. And
Is your mic plugged in this time though?
Mine is plugged in, yes. Yeah.
Was that the Bagby Champness one where you
No,
weren't?
just the Champness one, the
Oh,
first
okay.
one. Right.
He plugged it in the wrong hole, and so he was talking and asking questions, and it was.
we all been there, right?
Yeah. Happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
So, you ready?
We're recording.
Oh, dang.
This donkey.
Get it.
Welcome to Badges, Bullets, and Blunders. I'm the host, Travis Harless. Before we get started, if you'd like to support the podcast, go check out our friends at Slick Sleeves Syndicate. It's just a t-shirt company. Today's guest is my good friend, Ted. Ted is a police captain at a police department in California. Ted, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What did you do before you became a police officer? How long have you been an officer? And what are some of the assignments that you've worked as an officer?
Okay. Yeah. I'm from, I grew up here and went to high, and then
Go Stars.
go Stars. And then I went to BC for a couple of years and did not do well. And so I decided to join the military. I signed up for 4 years in the Army, and Uncle Sam kept me for an extra.
Nice.
So I did about 5 years in the military, and then moved to the Bay Area. Yeah, I did. I got stop
What year was
lost.
that? Like 02?
I was supposed to get out in January of 03, and I stayed until the end of December of 03.
Nice.
And then I used my terminal leave to get out.
Gotcha.
So, but anyway, but it was a great experience. Happy to talk about that if you want, but no, it's a good time. So got out of there, moved to the Bay Area, and ultimately moved back to a few months later and got on with the police department after my former mother-in-law saw an ad in the newspaper and said, "Hey, you should go get a job."
Yeah.
And so I applied and was pretty lucky, got in on my first try and went through the academy in January of 05, and been doing this ever since. So I think that as far as assignments go, a lot of the same assignments that you've had, where started off on patrol and then went to SEU, made SWAT fairly early as a collateral assignment, and then kind of went up the ranks as far as going to detectives and homicide, and then sergeant back out on patrol, and then SEU again, and VCAT, and then homicide again. And so kind of stayed between the special ops and the investigation side of things. Didn't really do the other side of the house until just recently. Yeah.
So you never worked in the training logistics, and then now you're in charge of training logistics.
Right.
Yeah. So what is your current position?
So I'm the captain over training, the training
division.
Yeah. So we got the academy and the hiring process and all the ongoing training that our department does.
Nice. So what is that like to go from having no background in that division at all to being the one in charge of the whole thing?
It's a pretty steep learning curve, but I'm used to getting in situations where I don't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And I have to figure it out because I don't come with a lot of inherent knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, figuring it out has been kind of just the way it's worked out for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been good. We have such great people that, the teams, especially any team that, like right now, our team, everybody's picked, you know what I mean? It's not like we just got saddled with people who don't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, they're all great people. They all work really hard. They all know their jobs and have just taught me what mine is, and so
they're competing for like these competitive positions, getting selected, and then you're getting people that have been chosen, at least theoretically, for their skill.
Yeah, their skill, their work ethic, their experience, all that.
Yeah, I think of it as I think you're this way. I know I'm this way. Like never being afraid to ask dumb questions, because I just kind of assume that I'm an idiot, and like I don't care if I look dumb if I ask the dumb question. Like, shouldn't you already know that? Like,
right.
Yeah, I probably should.
I assume you're an idiot. I assume I'm an idiot. No, I'm just kidding.
I probably should know it, but can you please tell me?
Yeah.
So that I'm not dumb anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. There are lots of times that and probably the same as you. Like I learned early on that I can sit there and try to fake it, but then I just look dumber later.
Mhm.
And so just be dumb from the beginning, and then you get to pick it up and learn and
Yeah.
get taught, get learned.
There's also a respect that I have for people that do that. Whereas like, because everyone can tell when you're faking it, even if you think that you're getting away with it, everyone knows.
Oh yeah.
And and then I'm just annoyed. Like if I ask you a question and you give me some bullshit fake answer because you just want to look like you know the answer, well, I know that you're faking it, and even if I don't, I'm going to figure it out sooner or later. And then I'm just going to be annoyed that you wasted my time instead of
All
just saying like, I don't know, man. Let's
Yeah.
figure that out.
Challenge accepted. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So, oh man, I had asked you before. I know we're not going to do like story time like we do sometimes on this podcast, but I am very. I wanted to do one. And there's this famous pumpkin incident that occurred back in, shoot, when was this? 2012-ish, probably.
Yeah, it was a while back.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm gonna have you do this one, and then I'll leave you alone. I won't
Okay.
make you. I won't make you tell any more of your.
yeah, I don't have a lot of funny stories
Yeah, you
that
do.
I'm horrible at that.
I've been
Like,
personally involved in many of them, so that's not true.
well,
okay.
I'm sure there are
We'll
some
go with
funny
that.
stories. I just don't. My family will ask the same thing, like, "Hey, tell us a funny story about working as a cop," and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like stage fright, I just don't. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the pumpkin story was one. I do remember that. that one had some blowback. The pumpkin story. It was a couple days after Halloween, and I was a senior officer at the time, working days, and there was a call for service that was pending, and it was that there was one of our citizens here that had some pumpkins that were damaged and kind of strewn about her front yard. They weren't her pumpkins; they were just pumpkins from the neighborhood. And
Some kids came through on
yeah, some
Halloween
kids
and
came through
smashed
and
the pumpkins.
yeah, and so I looked at it and I was like, no, that's a low level call that I can go handle and knock out, and an officer doesn't have to go handle it, right? I can take care of that.
I'm surprised that they actually entered a call for service. Like when
Yeah.
someone calls the police department and they talk to the dispatcher or the call taker and like, I would like to report this crime. Like, well, what's the crime? Like, well, somebody smashed some gourds in front of my
Yeah.
house.
Well, and I think so.
Some gourdicide occurred.
Right, exactly. So the way that I looked at it is the way that I read it and I understood it going. I thought they were her pumpkins, so I could see like maybe she put she or her family or neighbors or whatever put some time into these pumpkins. And,
Yeah, I could see you
and
being
the
upset. Like, say
jack-o'-lantern, right?
your kids like carved these pumpkins, and
Right.
some asshole teenagers came along and
Yeah.
smashed them, and
And then I
kids were
got
sad and
there,
upset,
and
but
that wasn't the case.
that wasn't the case.
They were who knows where they came from, but they had been smashed in her yard, and she was super nice. She was a very nice lady, and anyway, she'd collected some of the pieces. Some of the pieces were still out there, but she collected them for fingerprints
Mhm.
and saved them for me to
preserve the
to
evidence.
fingerprint. Yeah, she preserved the evidence and did a really good job of policing the crime scene. And so
She had it all taped off for you.
yeah, and so I
Got a crime scene log started.
right in my in my short-sightedness, I decided to treat the scene like a homicide scene, and my report reflected that. So, so I don't want to say I didn't take it serious. I took it probably a little too serious.
Mhm.
And anyway, so I went through the motions, and it was a
Yeah, like
I
this thing,
feel
it
like
said
was a
like it had the
well-written report.
measurements. Oh, the report was beautiful. It was like it had the measurements from like the curb to the what part of the grass. Like it was approximately 13 feet from the south curb line to this location,
Yeah.
and this many
Crime
feet
scene,
from
man.
the. Oh yeah, it's a very detailed crime, and it was like the victims of gourdicide appeared to have been formerly employed as a jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm an investigator.
Yeah,
I'm
trained
a
investigator.
trained investigator. So yeah. So that it's funny. One of my friends, Captain Ryan, one time asked if he's like, "Oh man, it was pretty funny. You'd do it again if you had the chance." I was like, "No, dude. Like, I got skipped on promotion lists. I got banished to a less than desirable patrol shift. Like, it was not good." So anyway, like I said, you live and you learn.
Yeah. So what was the because there wasn't technically even underlying crime
No,
other
it was a
than
littering
littering,
report
right?
is what it
Like what,
was.
like if you hypothetically, if you could locate a suspect on this, what would they be charged with criminally? And it's like, it
Littering is a
wasn't,
big deal,
it
man.
wasn't her pumpkin.
It
So
was
it
not
wasn't
her
like a
pumpkin,
vandalism.
right?
Uh,
It's an infraction.
Yeah.
yeah,
Littering?
Yeah,
littering
It's not a
and
misdemeanor.
littering and right. Yeah, no, it was like I said, I thought it was funny at the time. I still think there's some humor in it, but
yeah.
ultimately, some
Other people
folks
didn't find
disagreed.
it funny.
Yeah, and that's just what we got now. Now I'm one of those folks that gets to disagree
Mhm.
all the time.
You're one of the theys.
yeah,
One of
yeah, I'm a
the
they now.
Theys. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I know you want to talk about that. So talk to us about what is it like to become a they? I wonder when they begin. The they begins at different stages for different people. So like if you're a patrol officer, I wonder what rank does they start? Is it sergeant or is it above sergeant?
I would
it's
say
interesting.
I would say lieutenant.
Lieutenant?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
because
the-
you
I
as
would
a-
say it depends on the person. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'd say that. You could be a sergeant they, but you could also be a not they sergeant.
yeah, like we've all had supervisors that we felt just didn't get it,
Mhm.
right? Or that were more interested in um, I don't even know the best way to say it. Just more interested in the appearance of the thing as
Mhm.
opposed to the thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think that if if we looked at it more like we're all responsible for the appearance of the thing and getting the thing done, then we'd be in a little bit better spot. So,
yeah,
it to your point, I think lieutenant is probably the easiest rank to point at that, and I
Yeah.
felt like that was probably the least connected that I was
Mhm.
with the guys and gals that are doing the job.
More so than now.
Not more so than now, but that was where it started.
Okay.
Like right now, it's a little different. I mean, right now in the training division, I work pretty closely with everybody. So there's arguably more connection. As a watch commander, you deal with, your sergeants primarily, but even that, it's maybe you talk to them a couple times a shift and the officers, maybe you talk to the people that you got a relationship with, but
Yeah.
but ultimately you're trying to manage the work that they're doing and, trying to make sure that they're doing it right and that, you're being responsible and taking care of all the stuff that you got to do and training your folks and all that stuff, so it becomes more of a focus on the administration of the job as opposed to the application of the job.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we do a PowerPoint for the leadership. I know you've been there for that. We've done it fairly regularly. I think every 6 months.
Yeah,
or
you
so.
come into the patrol shifts and tell them about expectations
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah, and there's a difference, right? Where the brand new officer, it is 100% application of the mission, right? The chief, it is darn near 100% administration of the mission, right? But
Yeah.
they're still, everybody in between there is hopefully contributing to the mission and making sure that
Mhm.
they're doing their part for the team to make sure it's all good and going forward and progressing and all that. So
Yeah, and I think you talk about how like the job changes as you move through these ranks and through these positions, and like it's like I'm in this position now, but like right now, if somebody were to seize some piece of evidence, property evidence, and then hand it to you and say, "Hey, will you go book this?"
Right.
You would probably not be able to do that,
well,
right?
yeah, I certainly
I know,
would
like
I would have to ask
I would have
somebody.
to ask for help. Like,
Yeah, I would absolutely have to ask for help. Absolutely.
that's what I mean by like doing the thing, or like you're talking about like the mission, or like doing the task, and
Yeah.
like as you get further removed from it, you're less focused on the granular like actual doing of the thing and
Yeah.
more of the big picture.
Yep, absolutely. I was recently talking to our defensive tactics team and kind of likened it to a professional sports organization, right? Where you've got the players, players on the field, and that's the focus, right? Those are
Mhm.
arguably the most important people, just like the officers, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the coach, which is, in this I don't know, this example is like the supervisor, right? Where
Mhm.
the coach is, giving a little bit of guidance and making sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do and critiquing what it is that the players are doing. you get the GM, which is arguably like the lieutenant, and then the president, who's like the division commander, and then the chief is like the owner, right? And then we all have the fans, right? The fans or the public, where those are the folks that guide what we do anyway.
Yeah.
And so everybody wants the team to win, but what that mission and it's what the investment in that mission is at each of those levels looks a little bit different, and so it took me a while to learn that everybody on that chain has the best interest at heart. We all look at it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our different opinions. I used to get super frustrated with some of my peers and some of the folks that were up the chain from me, but then working more closely with them, you get to see how good of people they are. It doesn't mean that we'd still not get frustrated with each other,
Mm-hmm.
but we've got some just great people that really care about the folks that are doing the job. And sometimes that care and that I don't know that the best way to describe it, that care and that kind of that love for the group doesn't necessarily transcend. You know what I mean? Because it comes across as critique, and it comes across as Monday morning quarterbacking and things like that. But what it's really we know that everybody's working their butt off out there. We know that it's a tough job. It's in those same briefings we talk about, the officers now are better than they were when I started. Right.
Yeah.
I think that we were better than they were 20 years before that, and I don't say like character wise, but I do think that with the technology and the all of the things that we have, the information that we have available to us, I just think that we're better. Right now, I don't think there's anybody. I don't think officers have ever been better than they currently are. And I think that it's our job to keep that progressing. Right. So I would hope that I'm a better captain than what came before me. Now, granted, there's always going to be some people that were pretty good before,
Yeah.
But I don't mean this against any one person, but I mean, in general, we should all be pushing that ball down the field. And it's one of those infinite games, right? So it's not something that we ever win, but it is something that we just get better and better and better. And hopefully just like in professional sports, you see that the people that are out there and playing the games now, like, they're amazing. You know what I mean? Like even like the low level person, the difference between them and an all-star right now, it's that big, and them and an all-star 20 years ago, I don't know, like there's some amazing folks out there.
Yeah. I think here's like a football example. It's like, you look at, I don't watch very much football, but I'll pay attention to the highlights, but Saquon Barkley, the running back for the Eagles, and like you see this thing this guy does. Imagine putting him in like on a team in like the 60s or 70s when they have like the one strap like helmet thing, like
the leather helmets.
Yeah. And like what would happen? Like he would score a touchdown on every play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just run through those people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm a
like the level of athleticism and skill that is like just
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm
like MMA, like the early mid 90s UFC, original UFC.
Yeah, I watched UFC back then,
Yeah.
and those guys were animals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
those guys were
they
pretty
had different
impressive.
testing methods back then for PEDs.
No, but what I'm saying, like
then.
the early UFCs when they had like no weight classes and like the jiu-jitsu wasn't very popular, and you had like guys with like just all these random styles coming in. And compared to like the guys now, it's like, like Hoist Gracie was the man. But like if Hoist Gracie from 1997 were to fight anybody in any weight class now, he would get annihilated.
Yeah,
he
for
would
sure.
get killed. Anyways, there's a progression.
Yeah.
So one of the separations that was kind of coming to mind as you were talking, he said everyone's got good intentions essentially. And one of the frustrations that I've had sometimes is like, just in life in general, is like the enforcement or the pressing down of like what appear to be like arbitrary standards or policies or whatever, and getting frustrated with it. And this thing that comes to mind, I don't even know if I should mention it, but I'm going to send it because that's what I do. Is there was a directive about like leaving the patrol cars running when they're not occupied. And this thing came out a couple of years ago, and I remember getting it. And at the time, I was working the afternoon shift, and where we live, it gets very hot between May and October.
Yeah.
And in the heat of the summer, it's like we'll go weeks on end where we're triple digits every day.
Right.
And so, like, we have take home cars or whatever. I get in my car. I work the afternoon shift from 1 to 11 p.m., 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. Get in my car to leave for work at like 12:15 at the house. And you get in, it's like 130 degrees in the car. Temperature comes on. First thing I'll do is I'll drive it straight to the car wash. This is a life hack for everyone out there.
Yeah.
Get in the car like 10 minutes before you need to get in, drive it to the car wash, run it through that, and it washes the hot off.
Yeah.
And it will legit like drop the temperature from like 130 to like 85.
And science.
It's
Yeah.
it's like a 45-degree temperature drop that you can have just for like going to the car wash from the
Yeah.
time you start to the time you get out of the back. Anyways, recommend that.
The things you learn.
The more you know. So anyways, you get the temperature down on it, and then if you keep it running with the AC on, you can keep the temperature in the car like somewhat bearable, right? But as soon as you turn that car off and you close the door and you walk away and you come back 10 minutes later, it's an oven.
Yeah.
And so like we have these cars now that have the safety mechanism to where you can push the little button, take the key out, and then leave the car on, and you can't steal the car.
Right.
Like if somebody jumps in and
Yeah, you can't put it in gear.
the
Yeah.
engine dies. And I know because I would do it all the time. Like I would do the push button, take my key out, get out, go do my thing, and then come back later and get my car and not think about it, go to put it in gear, and the car's dead. And get restarted or whatever. So it's not like a safety issue. Like we're afraid the car's going to get stolen if it's on. The issue is like in the memo that was in this directive was like that the listed reasons were the gas that it costs for the engine to be running when there's nobody in it, and the hours of runtime hours and wear and tear
Yeah.
basically
Wear and tear on the vehicle.
on the engine running. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if there's a way to quantify like how much gas is burning in this car when I'm not in it. How much
There
time?
is. It's math.
Yeah. But there's a way to quantify it. But like, say hypothetically, I'm not in the car I'm leaving it running with me not in it for maybe 2 hours at a total time in a 10-hour shift, which is probably more than but let's just say 2
Yeah.
hours. How much gas does that burn? And how much does that cost? And I'm like, probably not very much gas. And also, if there was a way to quantify, it would be more difficult, the engine hours that are being run up on it and what kind of like wear and tear that's causing on the car long term, and like what the cost is. And like, what does that cost per shift or whatever? My guess is it would be like a couple bucks tops. And I'm thinking to myself, like when you're working this afternoon shift, right? Say it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you get sent to like a dead body call and you have to like go and be inside this like stinking house with this dead body for 2 hours, and you have to be out of that car and you're just like totally drenched in sweat by the time you're done. And then you go to get back in this car and the car is an oven and it's even
Right.
hotter in the car than it was outside after you've been dealing with the stinky body for the last 2 hours. And it's like, I feel like it's worth a couple bucks to not to have to have that extra layer of misery dumped on you.
Yeah.
And that, we talk a lot about like wellness and, we have this great, not to like trash the wellness. We have a wellness center, and like, great, you go there and you get a cheese stick and an energy drink and like, that's awesome. Like,
That
but
place
like,
is nice. I like that place.
yeah, it's great. But like, I think that this is a real practical, like if you're really worried about someone's wellness, like this is a way that you could like actually do something that would be, nice for the officers.
Yeah.
Like
Contribute to their wellness.
contribute to their wellness, right? Hey, like as long as the car's not going to get stolen, like, yeah, you can leave it running with the air on so that when you get back into it, you're not getting into the oven after being out of it for, a couple hours and being sweaty and hot and miserable. Like we can make it just a little bit less like awful.
I can understand that.
And like, it doesn't really cost us that much to do that. And like, I think we spend a lot more money on other forms, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we spend a lot of money on other ways to try to ensure wellness. And this is my argument is like, I think
that would make us well.
that would make us well, and that the
Yeah.
juice would be worth the squeeze. And the frustration that comes out, like when I see that memo and I'm like, okay, so what are we communicating now? Like, what are we Are we communicating that like the couple bucks that we're saving in gas and engine hours or whatever is more important than like you not being completely fucking miserable? Because that's essentially what like the underlying feeling that I get.
Yeah.
And I get frustrated. I'm like, why? Like, just let them run the fucking car, man. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's the juice is worth the squeeze.
Okay.
And that's
So
my stance on it.
And then, so what's your question on that?
It's a good, yeah. We could,
Can
it's a good
we
question.
leave our cars running?
Can you leave it?
No,
running?
I'm not asking for permission to. I'm just saying. I'm just pointing. I'm giving an example of where there appears to be a disconnect that happens, and
So-
when we talk about the us and them disconnect, and I'm not, I'm not a big. I am a them,
Yeah.
and I'm also
You're they.
a they. I'm a
Yeah.
they them.
You're they them right in the middle.
Yeah.
But I'm also like good friends with a lot of the thems too. So like I know these people. Like I know you. You and I have worked together for a long time. We've rode in a car together as officers. You know,
Yeah.
like. So I don't look at you as like that they guy that I don't really know. You know, like no, I know you, and this isn't your directive, right?
Yeah,
And I'm
no,
not
I
asking
know
you
what
to
you mean.
defend a directive that you didn't make or whatever.
I even
but
think I know your question, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
you're asking me to formulate a question, and I'm not very good at that. I'm just rambling on about
Yeah.
the disconnect between the us and the thems, and like how I could see that came if that came out as when I was a patrol officer, the frustration I would feel,
Okay.
and the disconnect that I would feel to the people that are sending the directive down.
That's fair. That's fair. And I would say there's a couple things. Like if that is one perspective, and it's an important perspective because wellness is a thing, right? It's something that was not a priority for years and years, and
Yeah.
now that it is a priority, I think that we're trying to do the most that we can with what we know about it, but I don't think we know that much about it. I will say that I think Baron does an excellent job.
Yes.
You know, I think that our program that we have is superior to most that I've seen.
Yeah.
I think that throughout the chain of command and throughout the line stat, everything else, I think that people care about each other. You know, I think that our culture is one that we care about each other. That said, anytime that we are going to pioneer a trail through a thing,
Mhm.
right, you're doing some trailblazing, you
Yeah.
know, and that means that you might go the wrong direction. You know, it means that you might not take the most effective or efficient route there. Now, when it comes to the example that you gave, if we're looking at it like I'm hot, I want to not be hot, and that would make me more well.
Mm.
Right. You
Yeah.
have a very good point. And that's not one that should be excluded. If you're looking at it like it's your car and your daughter's like, I'm just going to leave the deal running.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I'm going to take the little key fob with me into the store, but I'm going to leave the car running.
Yeah.
You're probably going to say, turn that shit off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you're wasting gas, because it's, you know, wear and tear on the car or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that it's not going to be cooler when she gets back in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just a little bit different perspective, right? Now, the wear and tear, we look at it like, it's only a couple bucks, you know, like, okay, how many officers do we have? 500,
Mhm.
480, something like that. It's only a couple bucks.
Yeah.
Now you're running, you know, $1,000 a week ish.
Mhm.
How many weeks, you know, $50,000 a year. And now it becomes a bigger drop in the bucket. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
Now, that said, I think that the real answer is use it when you should, and don't use it when it's going to be ridiculous. If you're going to be inside of a house and sitting on the dead body for 6 hours, there's probably no reason to run that deal.
Mm.
You know what I mean? If you're going to be there for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, or you're going to put a suspect in your car, cool that deal down. You know, so
Well, that's a real reasonable position. And the one pushback I would give is like, there's a difference between like your personal car that when you're in the store and what happens in that, and a car that's like got all this steel inside of it, like a steel cage and this or metal mount, and like there's lots of metal. It gets very hot and takes
so your police car gets hotter than your personal car?
yeah, like a lot, right? In a black
I don't-
car, you know.
Yeah, I don't
then,
doubt it.
And then also
my
like,
personal car gets pretty freaking hot.
and then also like wearing the big thing for me is so when I was in the Marine Corps, I got prickly heat. You ever get that?
Prickly heat?
Yeah.
Like heat rash.
Yeah, kind of. But like it's like when you're wearing like a flak jacket, and I got it like when we were out sweating and like doing whatever, and like your pores get like to where it feels like you're being stabbed with needles like on all of your pores.
Yeah.
And so I have this like I got a couple of weird things that I got trench foot. I got these things that like
You get
happen to
trench
me.
foot?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, during the march up, because we were only allowed to have 5 pairs of socks. It was
I'm just
stupid
kidding.
story. It was disgusting. It was really fucking disgusting and really painful. But anyways, I have these little things that like bother me that like I gotta have clean feet, fresh clean socks,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't like the feeling of the vest on my body sweating and that maybe it's the PTSD of the prickly heat from the Marine Corps, but like that really bothers me. And like when you're working on these days and you get on, like, you get dressed, like I get dressed at the house, I leave at 12:15. But from the walk to the door to the car, I'm sweating.
Yeah.
Already. Right. And so, so like one of my goals is like, I'm going to try to not like sweat because at some point I'm going to be drenched in sweat. It's inevitable. But if I can not be drenched in sweat in the first like 30 minutes of the shift, that would be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be neat. You know?
I can understand that. I think that,
which is more so than like just running in the store real quick and coming back out when I'm wearing my tank top, you know, and I'm just going to, whatever.
Yeah.
If I get a little hot and cool down real quick, like you don't cool
Right.
down.
the thing that we stand the closest to looks the closest.
Yeah.
Right? So,
That's the other
I
argument
think
too.
that
Is
there's
like,
some perspective there.
there is perspective. And I think that when that directive gets given out, the feeling is, you talk about getting removed from things. As you get further away from the thing, it seems more or less of a problem.
Yeah. And I
So
meant
it
biggest.
seems-
The thing we stand closest to looks the biggest.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it seems like a big problem to me when I'm living it. And I also think the flip side of that is when you're not living it and you're
Yep.
however many 5-10 years removed from
Yeah.
having
There's a
been in
shelf life on
position,
that experience, right?
it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. And you're just like, dude, it's just whatever. Dude,
Yeah.
like, so what? You're going to be kind of hot. If I can
Yeah,
get over it. You
You'll
know?
be hot for like 20 minutes.
Yeah. You'll be kind of hot, dude. Like, whatever. Stop crying about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for me,
I
I'm
get
like,
that.
no. It's like, not just like you're kind of hot. Like, you're really fucking miserable.
For 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever.
Until
So,
it cools down.
So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of that like extremism on both sides, I think. Like me being close to the thing, feeling like it's a lot bigger deal than it probably is, but also being whoever's giving this directive being really far removed and feeling like it's a lot less of a problem than it probably really is.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a
I
little bit
can
of
tell you
both happening.
with 100% certainty, the person that came up with that directive loves people, like
Yeah.
loves our officers, right?
Yeah.
He has zero just interest in people sweating or not being well. Now, that said, what if you just started your car 10 minutes before you're going to get in it?
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, according to the directive, like if you're not in the car or with the car, then
Right.
it's got to be off.
Okay. But the policies are a guide.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I think that
and ultimately that was my thing at the end of the day was like, okay, I'm not going to leave it running in the parking lot where someone
Yeah.
can see it and then bitch at me about it. But like, if I'm out and about and there's nobody else around that's going to notice, like, you know, if the
Yeah.
tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, to make a noise, you know?
Well, if we didn't want it, the collective, we didn't want that to happen at all, why would we put that button in there? Right.
Yeah.
So the button's there for a reason. The button's there so that it can be used.
Mhm.
It's not there to be taken advantage of. So just like everything, right? That literally everything that we do, it's here's the thing that you can do. If you do too much of it, it's probably going to be bad. You don't do enough of it, it's bad. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, there's balance in there. So I don't disagree with you. I think that it gets ridiculously hot here. As a matter of fact, I've actually, you and I have talked about this before with the going through cruise through or Mr. Car Wash or whatever it's called now, you know, and it's like this magic kind of,
you wash the hot off.
yeah, you wash the hot off. And my kids even know, you know, go take your truck to the car wash and you're going to get cooler, you know,
Yeah.
wash the hot off.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, we are responsible for the equipment. I don't want to give just a canned answer, but
Yeah, no,
I mean,
I'm not expecting you
Yeah, I
to.
mean, we
I don't really have
gotta-
a question. I'm just ranting.
yeah,
but when it
we
came
do have
out-
to take care of this stuff.
When it came out, I
You
was
know?
like, well, but why don't we do, because the company, since we've done this, but I was thinking the Cool Cop is the name of it. It's that little hose that you can attach to the vent and then you
Put
can
it right down your shirt.
put it right in your shirt to cool you off. And I was like, I feel like instead of this, what we should be doing is like providing other mechanisms to cool down, like the Cool Cop thing. And
Like
then
cloud
later
seating.
on they did. And then like, you know, like, I don't know, provide, sometimes they used to do this, like provide ice water in the ice chests, you know, that so I can kind of cool down a little bit, like and
Yeah.
make it a little bit less shitty and miserable. And anyways, those measures did go into effect later on. So
Yeah. And
I
now
guess
I would also say that,
that was just an example that came to mind of like this sort of disconnect that I've at least think I see sometimes.
Yeah, I like that example, and I like it for a couple of reasons. When we talk about perspective, I think that the perspective of the sergeant is the most important that there is when it comes to not just mission accomplishment, but wellness and administration and sticking to the rules and keeping people happy and doing all this stuff that's expected of us, right?
Yeah.
Because if you as a sergeant, I'm not you specifically, but as a sergeant, right? If you look at it like, hey, we're getting screwed right here, and that's the message that's put out. And I'm not saying that you did that with this. I'm just throwing that out there as an example. If it's, hey, here's the directive, but we should be doing this, then people think it's that they're getting the shitty end of the deal. You know what I mean? If instead it's hey, I'm going to, as a sergeant, think about the reasons that this could be effective, right? I'm going to think about the positive things in this. Like, we're going to save equipment, we're going to save money, we're going to, whatever the positive things are.
Yeah.
And those are the things that are explained, then people are much more understanding about it. You know, now, again, there's a balance in there where it's use your head, and it's there for a reason. It's a tool that we have. It's not something that you can't use, but if it's something that's taken advantage of, it's ultimately going to be taken away. So,
Yeah. And I think that you said that perspective of a sergeant. I think the sergeant's perspective is good because you kind of have a foot in both worlds.
absolutely.
So like you have a foot in what it's like, or being close to the experience of a patrol officer.
Yeah.
But you also have a foot in what it's like on the administrative side.
Yeah.
Whether like you're doing the administrative stuff, or if nothing else, then like I just know those people because I've been around long enough to where like I can just call you and be like, hey, what's the deal with this? And I can just ask you. And then I can tell you, well, this is what the people over on this side, this is what way they're seeing it, and give you that perspective. And then you can maybe provide some clarity, some follow-up, some clarification. And then I go, oh, okay. And then I can take that and share it with the other side. So then kind of, you have a foot in both worlds, and you can kind of act as a go-between.
Yeah. No, and that's huge. That's exactly why that's such a pivotal position. And it's, we always talk about it. It's the most fun position. It's the most important position. It's, as far as leadership positions go, but there's no two ways about it. That's absolutely the most important and pivotal position when it comes to leadership and how we do the mission that we do. Right. Like you don't need, as an officer, one of the ACs and I used to talk about this a lot. Like, I don't need the chief to tell me what my job is every day, right? I don't need him to tell me, how to use my baton or how to drive my car or how to write a report, right? You know how to do that, right? But you have a sergeant that gives you a little bit of, hey, you should emphasize this in this report, or you should, brush up on these skills or whatever else. And that's truly who shapes the folks that are out there applying our mission to the community that we serve, right? Doing what it is that the community expects of us. So if that rank is not in line with what it is that we're doing and where it is that we're going, not what it is that we're doing. And I don't say that like just fall in line and do the things you're told. But I mean, if you don't understand why we're going, or you don't understand why there's a directive that's put out, or it's not something that's been explained to your liking, or to a level that you can say, okay, well, it's not the way I'd do it, but I at least understand it.
Yeah.
Then ask about it.
That's kind of your job.
Yeah,
just to figure
that's
it out.
Absolutely your job.
If this doesn't make sense, we're being told to do this thing, it doesn't make sense, then your job is to make it make sense.
Yeah, we talk about proactive filtering, right? Like when the message is coming down, each level of that chain of command that is the next one to get that message should pick that thing apart and stress test it and push back and say like, well, this doesn't make sense or that doesn't make sense, because by the time it's gotten all the way down, the men and women that are getting that message are going to understand like, hey, here's a hole in this, or here's a hole in that, and this is bullshit, or that's, something that makes sense or whatever. But it's going to happen at some point. I don't want it to happen at that level. You know what I mean? Like, I want it to happen at the highest level possible so that we can have the best, most sound messaging that's going down, and everything kind of makes sense. But that only happens if, one, the message is from a good position, it's thought through, but it also only happens if everybody in that chain can understand where the ship is going. Like if you're way off here, you're not on the reservation anymore, then and that's the perspective you're going to stick to, then it's very easy to pick that stuff apart and to start splintering different groups. And all of a sudden we're not a team anymore. We're just a group of people that with a bunch of subsets,
I think of it from a leadership perspective, to avoid that splintering that you're talking about, and to really emphasize that stress testing. One of the big things that's important, I try to do this, is that like, I try to emphasize, like, if what I'm saying doesn't make sense or seems fucked up, I need you to tell me. Like if you're one of the people that I'm supervising, and this hasn't always been this way. There's been, what gets in the way of that is ego. Some people that are in leadership positions that got this big ego, and they don't want you to say anything to them. They want you to just shut your mouth and do what you're told. I don't act that way at all, because I want the mission to be successful. And I don't care so much about like if it's me that gets the credit, or like if I look good in the process. Like I care more about being successful and getting the job done. And so like, if I'm supervising you and I'm telling you something and it sounds like it's a little fucked up, I need you to say something.
Yeah.
Because a couple of things are going on here. Either what I'm telling you is fucked up and I don't want to drive off that cliff. I'd like for you to save us from getting there.
Yeah.
And I'll go, hey, maybe you didn't see this. And then I go, oh shit, yeah, I didn't see that. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. Or B, I am explaining it in a way that wasn't clear enough for you to understand. Now you don't understand what my intent was. And so I need you to raise your hand so that I go, oh, okay. Well, you're missing this piece of the puzzle. I didn't explain it well enough. Here's this, and I
Right.
can provide that for you. So you have to have a culture where that's acceptable to have that back and forth. And that's a kind of a newer sort of phenomenon. I'd say within the last 10 or so years.
Yeah.
That's really kind of going into effect more widely. So that, again, like you said, so there's not that splintering that occurs. So like if you give a directive, I'm like, that seems stupid. I mean, maybe I'll say it to myself. I won't
Yeah.
communicate it back that way, but I'll go, hey, this doesn't make sense. And these are the reasons why.
Yeah.
And then either you're going to go, oh yeah, you're right. That doesn't make sense. Let's fix that. Or you're going to
Right.
go, no, well, here's what you're not seeing. And here's the filling in those gaps. I'm like, oh, okay, I got it. But we have to be able to have that relationship where I'm comfortable going to you, either because you've made it a safe space to where I can, come at you with that. Or I just, for me, it's like, I just feel like telling the truth and doing the right thing is more important. So I don't really care. I'll just blurt it out to whoever. Sometimes to my detriment, to like make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, the part that I would say would add to what you've explained, to make a more complete picture, or the most complete picture, is that there's got to be trust on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, you got to trust the folks that are above you, and that they've got your best interest, and that they've got the mission, and that they've got all of those things in mind as they're making these decisions. Sometimes, like you said, the decisions aren't fully thought through. They're missing a portion, or they didn't think of a thing, or there's some special circumstance or nuance that particular decision or directive isn't going to apply in this, this one-off situation or whatever. All that stuff is fine. You know what I mean? But it's, have some trust that the folks that are making the decisions have best interest of both the department and the individuals in the community and all that stuff in mind. And I say that like it's been my own experience that I didn't always have that trust, and it really kind of led to some frustration that was just kind of misinformed. Now, I'm not saying that people can't have their own opinions or anything like that, but it took me a little while to start seeing just how much people cared, all throughout the chain of command.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to keep harping on it. I'm not trying to make a case for the chain of command. I think that individually we all create our own experience and contribute to that. But
so it was later on that you kind of broke the us them dichotomy or whatever. But let me ask you something. What do you think you can do specifically from a leadership position to create that trust?
So that's tough. I think that everything that you do either adds to or takes away from that bucket. Right. So I think that having discussions with people is probably the easiest thing. Now it definitely helps if, like you and I would work together, I don't know, 15 years of, close to 20 years. I don't even know that we've ridden in cars together. We've been on call outs together, like there's a lot that you and I have had in-depth discussions about philosophy and, just the way that things should be, the way that things are, and kind of how to reconcile all that stuff.
I feel like that's easy though.
That is easy, but that's the kind of stuff that builds trust.
Well, it's easy for me to have a trusting relationship with you because I've known you for close to 20 years and we've had all those experiences.
Yeah.
But what if I'm
the guy that doesn't know, right?
The guy that doesn't know you,
and that's tough. Like I don't know the right answer.
The guy that just got assigned to you, and this is our first day.
Yeah, it's tough. The number one, what's the number one problem in any combat situation?
It's communication,
right? Yeah. So it's the exact same in anything with stress. So did we communicate it correctly? Did we communicate what we needed to communicate? Was the message not just communicated, but was it received? Like I don't know. There's a lot to all that, and if you're trying to send me a message, but I'm in a different headspace and I can't receive it the way that you intend it, and I receive it the way that I receive it, right, based off my environment, based off your language and my interpretation of that language, then it's I don't know, is it a successful message that's been sent, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to that in the sense that we can intend the best things. We can try to make sure that we've addressed all of the different elements of that communication or of that, the solution to that particular problem. But unless it's received that way, it's not necessarily as efficient or as effective as it could be. I would say that to kind of go back to your question of what can a leader do for somebody that doesn't have that level of trust or that level
It's
of
just not there
familiarity.
yet.
Yeah. I would say just keep on communicating, you know what I mean? Keep increase that face time. You know, I think that's a huge thing, that when people see that the message is the same, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get a different message from me right here on this than you would at command staff meetings. You know what I mean? Like, it's exactly the same. I'll talk to you guys just like I'll talk to them, just like I would talk to anybody else. And I would say that, I might say more 4-letter words when we're by ourselves, you know what I mean? But probably not too many more. But the thing is, like, I would hope that it's not that dissimilar than the 20 years of experience that you've had with me. You know what I mean? Like, I hope to be that type of person. I think that as leaders, it is the more consistent we are with our character, then the more genuine we're going to come across.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're
that's the truth there. So I guess when I ask you that question, I kind of think through, like, well, what would my answer be? And there's a lot of components to that, right? A couple of things come to mind, but I think you have to actually care about the people.
Yeah.
And that comes through when you really do. It does come through in different ways. And I think that you not like making a specific effort to show that, but like through your actions, it can be demonstrated.
Yeah.
And when that happens and it's demonstrated, then that's when you start to really build trust. I think a couple of different things. I've been a patrol sergeant I was patrol sergeant for 4 years before I became an internal affairs investigator. It's another story. But so my background, like background was in before I got to that position. And when I got to that position and I'm supervising patrol officers, a lot of them have, very little experience, some of them a little bit more. But I realized that, so everyone's got their niche, their skill set. It's like my skill set that I was good at was like the weapons and tactics side. And so when there's something sketchy that's going on, that's like things are getting a little sideways, a little dicey.
Yeah.
Like,
you're a little more in your element.
I'm more in my element. Yes. And so this isn't appropriate for all patrol sergeants to do this, but like for me, it was like, well, I'm going to insert myself into that situation and be a more active participant in the situation, in the thing of doing the things, right? Because typically sergeants aren't doing the things, you're supervising the thing. And, and I kind of overdid it from time to time. Certainly I got better as time went on. Right. But as time went on, as I got better at it, look, if this is a dicey, dangerous situation where those skills are going to come into play, and I insert myself into that situation for that brief, 2 minutes or whatever it is until this is resolved, and putting myself in that position of like sort of danger, is a demonstration of like, I'm not going to have you do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself.
Right.
And then like that builds trust,
That absolutely builds trust. I would say that those situations become less and less available, right? Like, you wouldn't expect the chief.
Well, exactly. As the captain in charge of the training and logistics, there's not a lot of sketchy.
You're probably carrying a rifle into a call out. You know what I mean? And it's not because I don't still have that sense of purpose and all that. Yeah. It's just different.
That's not a scenario that's going to occur.
But I will say that it's important to do that where you can. It's easier as a sergeant, somebody that's there in the field with the officers to do that. Yes. And it's important that you do it. I truly believe, we all know that there's some supervisors that kind of house mouse it and stay inside where the air conditioning is and all that. Yep. I would argue or submit to the group that, there's probably less trust with that group than there is the officer or the sergeants that are out there carrying a rifle into a call out. You know what I mean? Now, I will say that it's a slippery slope where when you step in and you take over,
then you can overdo it.
And you're the doer.
Then you can become too close to the thing to be able to supervise the thing. And
then if the rest of the group is not supervised and so makes poor decisions or less than optimal decisions because of that, or as a result, then ultimately it's not necessarily a loss for the team, but it's not a win. You know what I mean? So there's a trade-off there.
And I've been guilty of that, certainly.
So have I. That's part of making the decisions that we have to make in the job that we have, and it's very similar to, all of our time in the military. There is not a playbook necessarily, right? You're making calls right then based off of the circumstances, the context, the nuance, the things that you're seeing and experiencing. And that is held up the foundation to what your decision is going to be as your training, right? And your character, and you're going to make that decision, and you're going to take an action, and hopefully it's a good one. I think too, though, that going back to what you said about building that trust, sometimes we get in this, like, one of the pitfalls is that we tell people what they want to hear as opposed to telling people how it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, what they need to hear.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, like, one of my pet peeves, and this, I'm not speaking for anybody else, I'm speaking for my own self, is the whole, our safety is the most important. I'm going to go home at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I think that is bullshit. I think that we've all signed up for a mission that is a little bit bigger than us.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we should send people just carelessly in to get hurt or anything like that, but you all have been in situations where it's been pretty dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's been something that you didn't elect to be in, and you've had to take action and at your own personal safety, at the risk of your own personal safety. Now, where I'm going with this is that sometimes we'll get into the officer safety. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not safe. Sometimes you just need to be really freaking good at what we do.
Well, what comes to mind is Uvalde and Columbine, or at Parkland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always
Parkland
think about,
Parkland and Uvalde are probably the best. Columbine, I feel like that's a little, we didn't know what we didn't know.
We didn't know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, so the example that comes to mind is, like, I say this when I used to teach, like, in a training environment as a ranger master, like teaching tactics or whatever.
Yeah.
We do active shooter courses. It's like there's some things that are more important in my life, so Parkland's a good example. So you see the video of that guy, I can't remember that deputy. He's a school resource officer, and he's like hiding outside of the building as the shots are going off.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, that's my worst nightmare. My worst nightmare is, like, showing up to a place where children are being murdered and, like, listening to it and not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's not the dying.
Yeah.
It's not the dying. It's not getting killed in this instance. It's worse to stand by and let, like, innocent people just get murdered.
Yeah.
That's way worse than dying.
Right. My perspective on that specifically, same with Uvalde, is like, go upstream from that, right? Like, somebody chose to put that player on the field and to train him the way that he was trained. And if you're falling back to the level of your training, like, it's hard for me to hold him as accountable as I do the department.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, it's something where I feel like that's one of those things that if we're not clear about our mission and we're not clear about the messaging and all that, it's very easy to get those things mixed. Now, I'll say all that. Personal protection is huge. You know what I mean? Like, you guys have been in scary situations. Like, sometimes I've been really scared.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I haven't just rolled up in the middle of shooting scenes and been like, I'm Superman here to take charge. I've been like, holy shit, am I going to get shot in the face? And now, that said, the level of training and the people that we surround ourselves with, and that kind of group culture, that even the subgroup culture of the folks that we associate with, I feel has been something where it's allowed, or it allows us to push past that, and I'll bring up that example of, I remember specifically, you and me were on VCAT at the time, and there was a shooting at one of the dispensaries or something like that during a warrant, and we got called over to it, and officers are literally running back and forth. And I remember you and I were standing there like, what the hell is happening right now? Like, let's just take care of this problem. Right.
Yes.
And it's, now, and I'm not saying that, we were so far highly trained or any of that. The point is, like, we just been exposed to that a lot more than they had, and so it's almost unfair to criticize them for not reacting the way that we would want them to, when we've had so much more time in the game than they have.
And I don't think of it so much as a criticism. Like, I'll level that same criticism against myself a million times over, because there's been plenty of sketchy things or situations where I just did some weird shit under pressure. Like, afterwards, like, what the fuck was I doing? Why did I do that? You know?
Yeah.
Like, you do weird things when it gets sketchy. Like, weird stuff happens.
Scary stuff is scary stuff, man.
So, like, I'm not even being, like, on my high horse and judgmental about that.
No.
I kind of laughed about it afterwards, at, like, some of the stuff that was going on. It was funny, but, like, I'll laugh at myself just as hard for some of the dumb shit I've done.
Yeah. No, and I don't mean, I'm not trying to point at you specifically. I'm just saying, as we go back and we look at Parkland or we look at Uvalde, like, there are failures there, no doubt. you know, but I've always had a tough time with those two specifically, thinking like, well, they should have this or they should have that. Because if you don't know what you don't know, you know, you're not trained in something, like we have this outside expectation, but if that's not anything that's been on the table for them, then it's tough, you know. And I don't know if it was or if it wasn't, you know. I think that we've all probably looked at debriefs and after actions for those things, and, you know, can point blame in different directions, but training is huge. Your culture is huge. And then at some point it takes personal action, right? And personal action under stress or under specifically life threatening stress is tough. You know, I've seen people that I thought were incredibly squared away that didn't handle being under that type of pressure well at all. I've seen people that I didn't even know would just come out as heroes in that sort of thing, you know. And it's always, I think, kind of it's where the rubber meets the road, I guess, for us, you know, where it's like there's shots that are being fired, or there's whatever it is. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be too specific, but there's it's always interesting to see when different people shine through, you know what I mean? Now, but I say that it is difficult for me to really typecast the people who don't shine through, because I look more upstream at like, okay, what was their training regimen? What was their supervision? You know, did their supervisors insist on their training? You know, did their departments make sure that they were trained and they were up to speed on everything? You know, were there any of those core competencies that were looked at and, you know, explained to them? You know what I mean? Like I think that is a huge part of what we do. And it's very easy to vilify people that perform less than, but we don't always look at the path that led to their failure. We just look at the failure.
Yeah. So what could we do as an organization to give them the tools they need to be successful in that situation? So how is that our failure as a organization more so than their failure as an individual?
Yeah. And so I don't know where I'm going with this. Is I don't know either of those agencies, Uvalde or Parkland. I don't know their training philosophy. I don't know their strategy or anything like that. I know that with ours, it's a cyclical system where it's, hey, we think that, you know, here's our responsibility. We're going to train consistent with our responsibility. We're going to supervise consistent with the training and the responsibility, and then we're going to review it and assess it, right? And if we assess it and we find that there are gaps based off of the results that we got over here, then we need to adjust and either go with more training or adjust training to fill those gaps. And it's a constant thing where every time we address or every time we identify gaps, we should have a response for that when it comes to training or it comes to messaging or it comes to whatever, so that ultimately, as we do this enough times, there are fewer and fewer gaps, right? And then it's a constantly shifting target, though, because then the law changes, right? Or the responsibilities change, or the resources change. And so the gaps aren't always going to be where we expect them to be. Sometimes it's, well, now this isn't illegal, so we don't want to enforce those actions anymore. So, you know, like drugs here, like I feel like they're a free for all these days. You know what I mean? When we started,
Because they are.
yeah, when we started, we were like high-fiving over, you know, little meth arrests, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, I got a felony pinch. Now that's not even illegal, you know, and it doesn't matter what our thoughts are on it. If the public wants to vote that way and change the laws, it's our job not to say that they're wrong or anything like that. It's our job to enforce the law and to police according to, you know, our policy, the laws, and the culture that we have. If what that looks like, and a lot of times what the frustration looks like is like, hey, we're chasing somebody for a couple bundles of meth. The public doesn't care about it. This person's not going to get in any trouble for it. Why are we jeopardizing the safety of ourselves, the safety of the suspect, or the safety of the community?
But you're talking about like chasing them in a car.
In a car, even a foot pursuit. Foot pursuit's pretty dangerous too.
Yeah.
So now, like I said, that's a made up example, but
Yeah.
you know, it's one that is I think relevant when we talk about this stuff, because all of that matters, you know, and as we're trying to constantly meet our responsibilities and those responsibilities change, then it's like, okay, well, how are we going to move these responsibilities and these resources over to, you know, another area where we can focus on and make sure that we go through that cyclical process of eliminating gaps and addressing what we need to address.
What do you think about, so with messaging, is like on the community policing model, and like providing messaging to the public? And I think about this, you know, having a law enforcement related podcast, but
This
law enforcement
is it.
adjacent.
Yeah.
This is messaging right here. What
Yeah,
we're
there
doing
we
right
go.
now.
This is messaging.
I specifically, you're talking about how drugs aren't legal anymore, and like the public voted this law in, and it's our job to enforce the laws the way that they're written. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But one of the things I think is like, there's a specifically Prop 47 went into effect in 2014.
Mhm.
We're 11 years removed, and you look around and you can see the direct consequences of that. What happened over those 11 years. And I wrote an article about this when I was one day. I was doing a lot of writing for a little period there, and this just kind of came into my head. I was driving down the road one day and I saw this homeless guy laying in front of this business with his hand down his pants, just getting after it in like broad daylight, like on that like a Tuesday afternoon or something. And I thought, like, that's Prop 47. So specifically for those who don't know what Prop 47 is, it's they decriminalized all of the possession of hard drugs in California. There's a couple other things that happened, but
From
used to be-
felony to misdemeanor.
from misdemeanor.
Yeah.
So it used to be a felony if you had usable amount of methamphetamine in your possession, heroin, cocaine base, all of the hard drugs. Marijuana was a misdemeanor at the time, and the hard drugs were felonies, just the simple possession. They made it so that those are now not only misdemeanors, but non-bookable misdemeanors. So you can't go to jail for that. You just get a ticket if you have meth in your possession. And it's like, well, what are the downstream consequences? Think about like fentanyl. We have 100,000, not in California, but across the United States, 100,000 people die every year of fentanyl overdoses. Like that's, almost double the amount of people that died in Vietnam, like every year from fentanyl overdose. Side issue, methamphetamine specifically. So methamphetamine, like the way it used to work, and the system before wasn't perfect, right? But it was, in my opinion, my humble opinion, much better than it is now. And the system before was you get caught with a little bindle of meths, you get arrested by the police, you go to jail, you spend a couple of weeks there, your case gets adjudicated, you get put into some sort of drug program, you're required to like go to these like whatever the kind of monitoring they have.
Right.
More than likely you're going to fail that monitoring and fail the probation or whatever, and it's not going to be, or you're going to fail the monitoring and it's not going to be a success story where you're no longer using methamphetamine. Like the government didn't fix your addiction.
Yeah.
But what happens is you'll go back out, you're doing your thing, and then a couple months later you get caught with meth again. Same thing happens. Arrested, you go to jail, do the whole process, and then this just like cyclical. And the argument is like, we're not really fixing anything. Like people are still using the drugs. We're not, whatever. I would argue that eventually you are fixing them, but and the other argument is like you shouldn't be putting people criminalizing addiction, where you're taking this person who has an addiction problem and you're putting them into this dangerous place with other people who like are violent felons, like
Right.
criminals, and like that's probably not good either. I agree with all that, but the alternative where we're at now, 11 years later, is like back then in the way back day, you would at least get these little windows of time where you're sobering up. You're getting put in a place where you're sleeping in a bed, you're eating regular meals, and you're not using drugs anymore. And like you're kind of resetting that clock. And then you'd go back out, you'd spiral out of control, and you'd be a fucking mess, get caught up again a couple months later, and then go back. And so there's these breaks in your poor decision
You get
making.
these opportunities. Yeah.
And so like we stopped doing that. And so what happens when you use methamphetamine? What happens if you use methamphetamine and you get caught, they write you a ticket, you leave, you just go buy some more meth and you just keep using methamphetamine? What happens if you do that for 11 years? If you use methamphetamine every day for 11 years, you go insane.
Yeah.
You become a schizophrenic, like 100%. You are a insane schizophrenic person. And then you look around, like, what do we have in California? We have insane schizophrenic people everywhere.
Yeah. We got a mental health crisis.
Everywhere. And that's the other thing that annoys me is like, oh, this is a mental health crisis. It's like a chicken or an egg problem. It's like, well, kind of, yes. Those people are mentally ill. But what is the underlying cause? It's not like this guy was just born like he's Russell Crowe and a beautiful mind, or like he just has this thing that could be mitigated with a little bit of medication if he would just take it. It's like, no, they did that to themselves. And I feel bad for them, those people that are involved in that, because I feel like we did that to them
As a society.
Yes,
for sure.
Because by decriminalizing it, by taking away the and again, system before wasn't perfect, But by just allowing those people to just run off and run amok and smoke meth every day for 11 years, we allowed them to go insane.
Yeah.
Whereas before, at least there were some sort of stop measures in there to at least kind of try to prevent that from happening.
Right.
And that doesn't exist anymore.
So
And like we did a huge disservice to those people. And I think about like as a parent, you know, like what if God forbid, one of my kids developed an addiction? Like if my response to that was like, here's some clean needles.
Mhm.
Just do it in your bedroom, please. Like that's not compassion. Like
Right.
that's making the problem worse. Like my response is like,
yeah.
I'm going to chain your fucking ass to the radiator and you're going to get sobered up.
With black snake.
You know,
know,
and I'm going to do that because I
radiator.
love you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying,
So, but now, and I appreciate where you're going with that.
can't remember what the original question was, but
The-
it was something in there based on something you had said.
yeah.
That, like,
Well, whatever I said was probably really wise.
Yeah.
And
I don't
you're
remember
probably trying to, yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. I don't remember either.
Yeah.
But
but no,
Now-
okay, we're talking about the law. So the public voted that law into place. And my question
Yeah.
was about messaging. I don't think the public, so like the public isn't paying as close attention to this as I am, right? Because obviously I'm a fucking police officer and I got to go out there and I got to deal with these people. I got to like deal with this problem and I got to in an everyday sort of effect. Whereas if I'm just the run of the mill person who's just like kind of not really paying that close attention, I see this comes through this bill gets proposed in 2014. And it's like, I forgot how they sold it. It was like,
yeah, Save
it was
Neighborhoods
gonna
Act
it was gonna save everyone and make everything better.
or Save Schools or
Yeah,
something.
it
Yeah,
was
it
like
was something crazy.
It's going to be super awesome.
Yeah.
And like, oh, well, I want things to be super awesome. Yes. And I vote yes
Right.
on that, you know, but like, I don't really understand. And then like, I forget about the bill I voted for a couple of years ago. And now it's 11 years later. And I'm like, why are there just,
So take us
why are
out
there
of that
insane
process.
people everywhere
Take police out of that process. What's the course correction?
to repeal,
Right. The voters change it.
to voters change it?
Right.
The messaging question though, is like, I kind of feel like we have a duty and sort of that was kind of what was going on in my mind when I wrote this article. It was called Suicide of the Golden State. And that was like, I feel like I know why that's happening. Like I know why that guy's jerking off on the grass there in front of the business and nothing's happening to him. I know the answer.
Right.
But if I was just a normal person, if I was a tradesman or something, I'm like, what the fuck is all these crazy people everywhere?
Why is that guy doing that right there?
Yeah. And so I kind of feel like I have a duty to explain that to people. Like, listen, guys, like
Yeah.
you were misled. You voted on this, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
And, like,
and you can certainly, like, you are a subject matter expert, right? Because you experience it every day. You
Yeah.
know, like a lot of people aren't. A lot of people don't experience that every day. I would say that there's a slippery slope in there because, and we can take this in whichever direction, but when we sign up to be the cops,
Mhm.
right, we're putting a badge that says a department's name on it.
Yeah.
Right. We generally get good people that sign up to be cops. Right. And I know that I don't know that we've talked about this, but some of your past guests and I have talked about this where good people have their morals, right? And they've got their principles that they live by. Usually we sign up for this job because it aligns very, very closely with, our individual kind of pulls and purpose and, the things that
yeah.
we find important, right?
Sometimes we're just broke and we need to pay the bills.
Right. But sometimes that's true. Our individual morals and preferences and all that are not bigger than the teams when it comes to when it comes to signing up for the job, right?
Mhm.
We're all putting on the hat of the team, the jersey of the team. The team's rules are the team's rules.
Yeah.
What Travis thinks or what Ted thinks or what Nick thinks, like that's all secondary, right? Now we're completely entitled to those opinions.
Yeah.
And we're entitled to those opinions as citizens, right?
Yeah.
Now, as officers, we have to represent what the team represents,
Yeah, of course.
and so the team represents what the voters represent because those are the laws that we have to enforce. So we can agree or disagree amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we're going to put the jersey on, we're going to play by the rules.
Yep.
So,
and I'm not advocating against like just going rogue and enforcing things the way I feel they should be enforced. I'm just saying like when it comes to messaging, and maybe not even as an individual officer, but maybe there's a community engagement division or something that could figure out a way to explain these things in a way that people can understand them, like mom always had a way of explaining things so I could understand them. Just because again, if I was just Travis the plumber and like I wouldn't really understand the origin of this and like how this all works out and like
Right.
why this has deteriorated so bad. I'm like, what's going on here? And I would appreciate if I was in that position, if someone would explain it in a way that I could understand. And they go, oh, okay, well now I know why that happened, and now I can make a more informed decision the next time that ballot comes through. And I don't know. I don't think that it should be up
Yeah.
to the officer who responds to the call when, you know, when Travis the plumber calls because my truck got broken into, you know, the third time this year, to say, well, hey, Travis, you voted for it. Here you go, bud. I don't think that's
Yeah.
that
I
officer's
would agree.
job.
That's probably not the
Shouldn't be
best
doing
route
that
to
because
take.
they're wearing the jersey. They should just, you know, play with the team's rules. But someone or some group of someone's maybe could construct a message to kind of explain, and
Yeah.
not in like even a judgmental sort of way. Like I'm going to say, hey, you stupid, you voted for this. You get what you voted for. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and frankly, we don't know which way they voted. But
Yeah.
My point is, in the big picture, it will course correct, right? It might not be on our timeline. It could be very, very frustrating for us,
Mhm.
but it's going to course correct. It's going to course correct to what the majority want, you know. And now how that translates to messaging, internal and external, specific to the police department, that's tough. You know, I don't really know because it's not on our timeline, you know. But
Yeah.
if the public looks at the stuff that's going on and they're like, hey, we voted these things and it's had this result that was unanticipated, excuse me, now we want to have this other result, you know what I mean? And so we're going to pull these different levers to, you know, go down this other road. Then that's what we do, you know? And that's, again, as that cyclical thing that we talked about earlier, we start to look at the gaps, you know, and it's not just training, but it's the mission itself. You know, we start to look at the gaps or the things that, the results that were less than optimal. And then we course correct and start changing things upstream so that the water flows where we want it to flow. I am not convinced that that's an efficient process or that that's a concise process or anything like that. It's something that it takes a ton of education. It takes people not just listening to what the problems are, but I mean, it's gotten so politicized and divisive right now that, you know, it seems more about, oh, you're on that side. Well, I automatically don't listen to what you say, you know, which doesn't help anybody.
Doesn't help anybody.
You know what I mean? So,
and that's why I don't know. I don't know how to specifically message it. And it's funny to sit and be the ideas guy and just pitch be the good idea fairy, just throwing these good idea fairies up, or good ideas for other people to deal with. I feel like that could be one of our duties, is to kind of explain, not just that, but other things, and explain why things are happening the way they are, in a way that people that aren't paying super close attention or living in that world that we live in wouldn't necessarily understand. And it is a slippery slope, like you said, and it is super politicized, and that would be a real hard line to walk. So I don't know.
Well, and explaining to the gentleman you came across, I think is that message that you're going to send, is it going to be what he receives? You know what I mean? And is he going to receive it with the same emphasis on the same values that you're sending it? You know, and I take that I say that is just a small example of different people are in different portions of their life. You know what I mean? And they've all got a different understanding. We all have a different understanding, and there's different values that, you know, you have as a parent, and, you know, you have as, you know, a homeowner, and, you know what I mean? Like all of the things that we have contribute to the person that we are. And sometimes the education that you might be giving somebody falls more or less on deaf ears, because that's not a thing that they're that worried about. You know what I mean? So I would take that back to you as far as it being our job or our duty. Is it really our job or our duty, or is it more our job or our duty to police effectively, be good people, you know, go do the things that the community needs of us, as opposed to trying to shape the community? Now, I'm not saying that it's not our duty to shape a community. You know what I mean? I think it's good people's duty all the time to help shape their community and contribute. I just don't think that it's necessarily or specifically a police thing. That doesn't mean the police can't be part of it. But I think
you sort of sound like me.
Well, it's a tough thing, man, because what we do and the role that we've taken and the freedoms that we have, and you guys have been to other countries. I can't believe how good we have it. You know, our country is so much better than literally any country I've ever been to. And I've been to a bunch, you know, and I know that you guys have as well, you know, and it is something else to go to another country that it does not have the freedoms that we have. And, you know, the people that sit here and complain about this or they complain about that, it's like, just go take a trip. You know what I mean? If you can, you know, it is completely different. And so because that's such a valuable component of my own experience, like I really feel strongly that it's not our job to shape that all the time. You know what I mean? It as a police department, as people, you know, we can be involved in whatever we want because we're citizens of this country, and you know, we're just as entitled as the next person, right? But as police officers, that's a little bit different, you know. And I'll give you an example. Like, what if the police were ran by a group that you didn't align with? You know what I mean? Would you want them telling you how to do things or educating you in the way that they feel it's important to educate you? You know, and
what you mean by align, and also the person or persons in the position of running it, are they allowing that philosophy to dictate the way that I guess what comes to mind is political beliefs, right?
Mhm.
And are they allowing those political beliefs to dictate the policies and the measures that are being done? And I think you can have differing opinions on those kind of topics, but still toe the line of like what's right.
yeah, you
And
can
that's
if
kind of
you're
that's kind of like the whole point. Like you're supposed to,
yeah.
you know, like
If
like
you're disciplined, you can.
well, yeah, but
Look at all the countries that we've been to,
yeah,
the countries that we've carried guns into.
and you say, what would I do if the people
It got out of hand.
Yeah, if the
Right.
people in charge had a different opinion or whatever, like the opinion doesn't matter; it's the action that matters.
Yeah. I do agree with that. I would say that the action and the opinion are more closely related than they are separate.
Mhm.
Right. So in general, the actions are derivative of the opinion. You know what I mean? So anyway, like I said, it's
What comes to mind? So think about 2020 when the riots showed up, and the riots were specifically against the police profession and like our local police department. A bunch of rioters showed up from the building, and they're doing their whole thing and having their protest. And my whole thing on it was like, well, obviously, I don't personally like the fact that these people are screaming, you know, "fuck the police" right at me, right? But so I don't personally enjoy that, but it's my obligation to preserve their constitutional rights to do so.
right.
And so that's my position. That's, I think, a pretty perfect example of that. It's like, I fundamentally disagree with your message because your message is that you just hate me.
Yeah.
So I don't like that. But like, I have to do what it takes to facilitate your ability to do that. Like
Yeah.
I'm okay with like blocking the traffic and making sure that like you don't get run over or that like some outside person doesn't come in and like hurt you or take away your ability to do that while you're actively telling me to go fuck myself.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a good example of like implementing, like, I don't agree with your opinion on this topic, but it's my job to facilitate you being able to express that opinion.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's also our again, up the chain, it's our responsibility, in my own opinion, to look at why they're saying that. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying, like, I didn't like it either. You know what I mean? I don't like seeing my friends get bottle rockets in the face or,
Yeah.
you know, or we all.
Well, the
seen
Reason why it
Bobby
gets
spit all over his back. Like, I don't like any of that stuff.
It gets squirrely.
It
Like,
does.
especially in these this many years removed. It's like, I don't know. Like, I think the whole thing was a psyop. You know, like it was a rent a riot, just like not organic.
Yeah. Well,
But whatever.
but yeah, yeah, and I won't go into any of that.
Yeah, we don't got to go down that rabbit hole.
but I do think it's important to listen to why. You know what I mean? And I say that as an oversimplification, but
Yeah, and that's
people
what
feel like they're
and that's where engaging is important too.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we're terrible at is like, you know, telling our story. You always hear that, like, oh, we're going to tell our story, and it's like, well, it would be kind of important. And I wasn't involved in any of these conversations, but if they're showing up in the underlying. Here's an oversimplified version of their position. The anti-police rioters is that there's a genocide of young, you know, unarmed black men being killed by the police that's happening all across the country, and just these droves. But if you ever nail anyone on a specifics, like, okay, how often is that occurring? Yes, like some people will say it's like thousands and thousands of them. You know, and it's like, well, but when you get down to the actual numbers of like, not justified or unjustified, but like specifically that category, unarmed black males who were shot and killed by the police, it was something like 15 that year. Right. And that's not saying whether or not they're just, because some of that's like a guy trying to run the officer over with a car, considered to be unarmed, but
Right.
it's a justifiable shooting. A lot of that, right? So like 15 occurrences across the whole country in 1 year. Even if all of those were bad, like that's not an epidemic. That's a problem that should be addressed and should be fixed. But it's like there's a lot bigger problems, like, and not to minimize the 15, right? But like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Like there's a lot bigger problems, and like, but I think that the perception based on the way it was packaged by the media, by social media, by kind of why this is a psyop,
right.
like was that this is happening thousands and thousands of times. It's happening every day, all day, everywhere. And if that was the truth, I'd be right alongside the rioters saying this is fucked up. We need to change this.
Yeah.
And I would totally agree with the cause, but the underlying reason for the riot was a lie.
So I don't disagree, but I would say think of my choice is to think of it a little bit differently. I won't tell you how to think. I prefer to look at why they're saying the thing, right? The truth is the truth, and the truth will come out. So the stats will be the stats. For them to rely on stats, or for us to rely on stats, or for us to even draw that line between them and us, you know what I mean? Like that's all. I don't know. That's all just positioning in politics, and I don't know. It is, I think, something that if the media wants to put out a disproportionate emphasis on a thing, but the stats support something different, or the reality of it supports something different, that's going to come out. It's not fun for us who are stuck in the hot spot in the meantime. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that we don't do anything about it, but I am saying that
and this isn't us specifically, like I'm our agency, but you see a lot of the agencies during that time, they would like go out and do the thing where they lay down on the ground. Remember that? Like they lay on the prone position or kneel, and like all of that was like all of this just kind of gross, like pandering. Yeah. And I don't think that that's the right response. I think the right response is to be like, hey, like, what is it specifically that you're upset with?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, how often is this happening?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually not really happening that much. And like, I'm not minimizing when that does happen. That's terrible. That should be dealt with. And I would say that we do a good job of dealing with that when the officers mess up, they make legitimate mistakes or commit legitimate crimes, like we deal with that.
Right.
I can tell you as an internal affairs guy, like we do a really good job of like sorting that shit out.
Yeah.
And maybe message that back. Like, actually, like here's some times that we have messed up, and here are the corrective measures that we've taken to solve that.
Yeah.
If you're worried about us not handling our business in-house, like we're actually handling our business.
Do you think that you're going to convince somebody that doesn't want to hear it though?
Yeah, good point. No, but I think that kneeling or laying down as like a way to
gesture,
like
a gesture to
measure,
to capitulate is definitely not the right answer.
I would agree with you.
Make that thing better. And again, we didn't do that.
No, but I do think that it is never the wrong choice to do the right thing, right? And that's a kind of an oversimplification, but we should always hold ourselves accountable. Like the authority and I know that you agree. The authority and responsibilities that we have, I think, they're so great that it is inherent on us. It's our inherent responsibility to police ourselves, right? Yeah. Probably to a higher degree than we would the general public.
Absolutely.
And I feel like
because there's a public trust element.
Absolutely.
The police exist because the public has outsourced their violence to a third-party government entity, and like we have that authority. And like
that's one way to look at it.
That's one reason.
I think that they've. I don't think it's so much outsourcing the violence as I do
entrusted.
You're entrusting people to take on that responsibility of doing the thing that you don't want to do, which is more about going in harm's way than it is about doing violence. But doing violence is a portion of that.
That's an oversimplification. Not just like we're out committing violence. I mean, like that we're not the Hatfields and McCoys. Right. If there's no police and we're just kind of existing, and you wrong me, and the only recourse I have is to deal with it myself, then things spiral quickly.
Yeah. No, I
having
agree.
A third party arbitrary or
unbiased
third party that handles that dispute. That way we're not getting into a blood feud. Like, you know what I mean?
As long as, I agree that by design, that's the way that it is, right? We're not We're not an occupying force or anything like that. We are that third party group that should be unbiased, but we're talking right now about all of our own opinions, right? So we're not unbiased. It's something that we should be able to have an objective stance that is.
I think the focus on bias is dumb. It's obviously you have your bias, right? Like I care more about my kids than I care about your kids, right? Like, duh.
Yeah.
Like I have my opinions, but like as an officer, like you're not allowing those opinions or those biases to affect your actions. That's what's important. And that's like when
you're just gonna be a grown up about
things
it.
get like squirrely when they talk about like unconscious bias and like how it's like, go fuck yourself, in my opinion. Like,
hey, people got to make money.
Exactly. It's a grift. It's like, what are they doing specifically? If you could point to a thing that you've done that's wrong, then we'll deal with the thing. But if you're trying to police my unconscious bias, then like go fuck yourself.
Your brainwaves are racist.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's the easiest cop out is that, you know what I mean? So like
and the example, like I said before, is like my opinion is that these people are wrong and they hate me, and I don't like that they hate me, but my duty is to ensure that they have and even facilitate their protest.
Yeah. But think bigger than that too. Like it is also, if we're going to make the best decisions possible, then we need to know the origin of the problem, right?
More knowledge.
There was a problem. You know what I mean? I would say that there is a problem. Now, I don't think that it's inherent to police departments. You know what I mean? I think that it's we're equating police problems to society, or we're trying to solve society issues with police solutions, right? And that's just, I don't think that it really works that way. I think that if your parents raised you to be racist, you're going to be a racist. It doesn't matter if you're a cop or you're a school teacher. You know what I mean? Like you can change that, but you're going to have you're going to have that narrative that's been spoon fed to you up until you became an adult and you went on your own, right? And then it's going to be a matter of who you associated with and who that group was and what those group norms are. I think that there's my personal opinion, and I've only ever worked with this agency, so I don't know, I don't know how it is with other agencies, but I've worked with a lot of other agencies, not as part of them, but alongside of them. And I have not seen racism. Like I don't see racism. I see the opposite of racism. I see people that are so culturally just educated that they're going into people from this race or this culture or that culture. They're going into their homes all the time and not offending people. They're going in there and taking care of people. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but that doesn't mean that it didn't exist. That doesn't mean that it doesn't still exist. It doesn't mean that that's not the lens that people see that issue through, So,
and this, and again, you talk about social issues that are social issues and police solutions. There aren't police solutions to this social issue. And this is a social issue. It's like we're getting down the rabbit hole of racism. I was born in 1984. I was born 20 years after the Civil Rights Act.
That year.
Yeah, it's a good book. Anyway, and I grew up, I remember like in a racially diverse schools, you could say. And I remember being taught about Martin Luther King and being taught about like judging by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. And like, that was just like, okay, that's how we do things. And like, I grew up in that environment, and it wasn't until I became an adult and like post like being adult for a while where like things started to kind of shift and like away from that to like, now we're going back to like taking the scab of, the country's history, or I should say, in a short form sort of way. And like really focusing on like picking that scab and really driving home the division. And it seems astroturfed. It's coming from somewhere else other than like the reality on the ground. Like someone is trying to kind of keep us separated for some sort of reason.
Yeah.
And that's not a police problem. That's a social issue.
Right. Yeah.
And it's manifesting into a police situation that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But it's not the police that are driving, not even driving racism, but driving the narrative of what racism is. Another frustration I have, sorry, I'm kind of getting far afield here.
It's your show, man.
Is that like, I don't think that we have a race problem. I think we have a class problem. And like in the town that we live in, think about a young black kid living in the projects to being raised by a single mother with a drug problem has a whole lot more in common with a young white kid growing up in the certain part of town in a trailer park with a single mom who has a drug problem. Yeah. They've got a whole hell of a lot more in common, despite their racial differences, than like, you know,
A Mexican kid.
yeah, then say
Yeah.
like the black kid in the projects has another black kid who grows up in a two parent household that are like loving and like, you know, pay
Yeah.
attention to him and you know, raise him with good morals and values. Like the people growing up in squalor have a lot more in common, despite their whatever the racial differences. Like who fucking
Agreed.
cares? So it's not the skin color that's like what's different about our experiences. It's the class structure and it's like the you know what I mean? I guess.
Yeah. We're based on capitalism, right? So money is the thing that gets us the things that we want, and the people who have a lot of it get more of it, and the people who have less of it get less of it.
Yeah, money.
And so I would agree with you. I don't
but like
argue that at all.
But what values are being taught? What's the situation like in the home? Like, is it?
Yeah, I'd say that goes beyond just one's economic origin. You know what I mean? I think that there is. I'll give you just a quick example. My grandmother lived through the Depression, right? The Democrats brought us out of the Depression. Because of that, she would never vote Republican on anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's her own belief that the Democrats were the ones that saved us, and you know, and that was her reality.
Yeah.
You know, and so it doesn't really matter what my opinion is, or you know, if I tried to say, well, what about this or what about that? That was her reality, and so there was no convincing her, you know. And so I say that people who have lived through racism, or they've lived through seeing, you know, police brutality and things like that, like that's a whole lot different emphasis on that experience that they have than you or I have. You know what I mean? Like I can sit here, the three of us can sit here and say like, well, we've, you know, been doing this job a long time. I've never once been in a fight or use of force that was based on the color of somebody's skin. Not once. You know what I mean? Like that's crazy to me, right? Like most of the time it was, you know, just circumstances where you're surprised by it, and it's like, holy crap! Now I'm fighting somebody because they want to attack me. You know?
Yeah.
Okay. And on that note, so like we just keep going back to 2020 riots. If during the 2020 riots, if a bunch of 60 to 70-year-old, you know, Black men and women who experienced police brutality and racism showed up and were like, hey, this is our lived experience, then I'd be a lot more sympathetic than like what actually happened was like a bunch of purple haired thems like that are like 19 years old. I'm like, what?
Oh, there's
you know
no
I mean? Like,
argument that narrative was hijacked.
Like, what are you even talking about, bud? Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Like I said, people,
this isn't your lived experience.
I understand that. I will say that it's, in my opinion, it's important to give people, I don't want to say give them their beliefs. That everybody can believe what they want. They have to have the space to be wrong, right?
Sure.
Now, just because they didn't live that experience doesn't mean that they can't come about an informed or a legitimate opinion. You know, so if we was a racist institution and they're vicariously affected through the experience of somebody else, and now they want to protest, then they should be able to.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know,
Or even if they're, again, in my opinion, completely wrong, they should be able to.
Yeah.
And it's my duty to facilitate it.
Absolutely. And I don't know that it is like, while we're wearing the jersey, it's not necessarily our spot to educate, you know what I mean? Like to educate personal morals, you know. Now, when it comes to educating statistics and it comes to educating in programs and things like that, absolutely. You know what I mean? Because that's legitimate stuff that the police departments, and not just ours, but all of them do to help communicate just oneness with the community.
To have a community engagement division.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Community policing.
I'm all for it. That should be coming messaging from that group, not the guy in the riot helmet standing on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am for our community engagement division. I know that
I am too.
That has been something that it has been a little bit of
I think it gets
argument
we
here.
don't need to go down the rabbit hole now. It gets misinterpreted. Maybe is like my kind of position is I think that's great. Just like I think that the traffic division is great, and I think that the special operations division is great. I think that those things
and
are
the training division.
Yeah. Well, these are all great components. My frustration is when it becomes elevated to the highest thing. And then I'm like, well, maybe that's not it's a thing, but I have a problem with being the thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I get frustrated.
Yeah. No, I like your argument with that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I like it. Because it makes sense to me. I just think that I think that I don't think that it's the highest thing, but I have a different perspective, right? Like I talk to the other command staff folks, the captain that's in charge of that division, just like the captains that are in charge of the other divisions, and have a lot of respect for the way that we're doing the things. I do understand too, as I would imagine that you guys do, that they didn't start their career thinking I'm going to be the captain of this division or that division, right? They got assigned that based off of their experience and their interests and their.
And I support them, and again support their mission.
So everybody is doing their part, but beyond that, it's like they're interpreting where the chief and the community want us to go, and they're doing the best thing that they can with the resources that they have. Yeah. I personally am a big believer in going to that division and being part of, like we've talked about, going to the places where the people want to see you, as opposed to going to the places where people have to see you.
It's a positive experience for sure.
Yeah. And I wish that more people from special ops would go, like I know that you've done a bunch of demonstrations with the SWAT team and things like that. To me, that was super cool early on. It initially was, I don't want to get up and go do this thing or whatever. Yeah. But seeing like the kids come and, put on the helmets and all that, like, that stuff's really cool, and then you get to see some people that it's like making their day. It's a nothing deal to you, but it's making their day. And it's, I don't know, like I'm hoping that whether or not they become police officers down the road, hopefully they at least have like a little bit of a positive experience with the police, as opposed to just these, shiny boot, thugs that walk around with a bunch of muscles and just take people to jail. Like we're more than that. Our problems are bigger than just arresting bad guys. So our solutions and the team that we field has to be a little bit broader as well. So
we're not just outsourced violence.
No. Yeah, exactly. Travis, we're not just outsourced violence.
Yeah. So I've a lot of things I've said that have been misinterpreted live. It's one of them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to misinterpret your own words, but I know what you mean though. Like it's at the probably the idea that people would have of policing is catching bad guys, right? That's ultimately probably the job that is our biggest responsibility, is stopping the bad.
And my stance on that is that's another thing, and it's not the thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, just like catching bad guys isn't the thing, I think that community policing isn't the thing. I think those are all a thing.
We have absolutely morphed from law enforcement to policing. You know what I mean? And Simon Sinek talks about this, and he does a much better job than I will. But whether we like it or not, that's where we find ourselves. We can say that we disagree with it and that we should go be the guys that catch the bad guys and all that. We have to be that. But there is not another group that is better suited, in my opinion, for all of the other things that come and land in our lap. You know what I mean? Like we can talk about social workers and they do a great job. Once it gets to be too dangerous, who are they going to call? They're going to call us, right? We can talk about mental health folks. Once it gets to be too dangerous, who are they going to call, right? So that ball keeps ending up in our field, whether we want it or not. Yeah. I would agree with pretty much everybody that has an opinion these days that that's not a policing problem.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's not a solution to it. When bad things are happening right then, upstream. Yes, we want to be able to give all the services. We want to have the education. We want to be able to intervene before it becomes a crisis. Of course we do. And even when it becomes a crisis, we want to be able to intervene with words. We want to be able to, bring people down. You know what I mean? We want to de-escalate all the stuff.
All the buzzwords.
But it goes beyond that. Like it's legitimate stuff. It's not. It is buzzwords now, but it's stuff that we've been doing forever.
And that was another problem I had when the de-escalation came around. I remember it was in 2015 or 16, is that started, little things start creeping into the narrative, they creep into the ether. And that was like a thing. And I remember laughing it off, like being told like, hey, you need to explain more about like de-escalation. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like it could be, and I laughed it off because like the idea was that we're just out willy-nilly just beating and shooting people. And I'm like, well, actually, we don't do that very often. That's pretty rare when we do.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Most of the time,
always been pretty rare.
Most of the time, we're like finding solutions that don't require any amount of like force or violence. And so like all we do pretty much is de-escalate.
Right.
And and again, I've been a cop for 18 years. I've never been an officer involved shooting. I pointed my gun at a lot of people. Yeah. I don't even know what the number is. Lot, right? Whatever the number is.
Pointed at me.
Sure.
I know. It's
but take that number and say, every single time that happened, I de-escalated. didn't shoot the person.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like laughable to me when like the narrative is like, oh, you don't de-escalate. I'm like, that's literally all I do.
Oh man, somebody came up with a new term, and
Yeah, they came up
you
with
know
this
what I
new
mean?
buzzword, and then it's just like
You got to have a
constantly
reason
being
that it's important to
thrown
say.
around there. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
and I feel like when somebody's like, hey, you need to explain how you're de-escalating efforts. I just want to look at them and be like, shh, adults are talking.
Well,
And like,
now
and like, it just like you're so far removed from the reality that like I don't even know where to begin the conversation.
I would imagine though that in your experience and given some of the assignments that
I
you've
wouldn't
had,
actually I wouldn't actually do that, but
but hear me out. Like in your experience and some of the assignments that you've had, I can guarantee that you've looked at situations or reviewed situations where you're like, yeah, they probably didn't have to do that. Not necessarily use of force, but
sure.
they didn't have to say it like that.
Oh yeah.
They didn't have to start with
Hey, I've
put your
done
effing
that.
hands up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Look, I have
Done
done
that to
things
myself.
looking back
I
like,
agree.
man, maybe I didn't
agree.
need to do that.
Yeah. So now, so it's difficult to say that we don't need to focus on that. You know what I mean? That we don't need to focus. Like, could you have de-escalated that a little bit? Could you have attempted to de-escalate? It takes two to de-escalate, so we don't de-escalate anything on our own.
Yeah.
Now, is it something where we could have tried a little bit harder to bring it down a notch? Absolutely. You know what I mean? If we're bringing, you know, we've talked about this, but if we're bringing chaos to the chaos,
Yeah.
what's the result going to be? It's going to be more chaos, right? If we're bringing calm to the chaos, it's a little bit different, and we can have a
To
hopefully
push
good
back
result.
just a little bit though, is that there's always more you could have done in an attempt to quote unquote de-escalate.
Yeah,
No matter
no,
what
that's-
the situation is, you could
Okay.
have tried a little harder. But would it, my question is it appropriate based on the circumstances? Is it appropriate? Should you have tried a little harder to de-escalate?
Yeah, I don't always agree that
like-
there's always something that you could have done to
like-
try harder. I think that there are plenty of
You
opportunities
could have said
where we
drop the
tried.
gun 6 times instead of 5 times.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like before.
maybe, you know what I mean? That's one of those things we'll never prove, because if they didn't drop it after
But-
5, what's to say that it dropped it after 6?
And
right?
that's why I said, is it reasonable?
Yeah,
Like in that situation.
that's it. And that's where I was going to go, is that there's this just kind of focus or, kind of tendering of reasonabut that we're
Yeah.
trying to hit. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Now, if it's, that's probably an ironic way to say that, but you all know what I mean.
Yeah.
If it is something where we're going, we're doing announcements and please give up while each of the kids are being killed, then it's probably not reasonable anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like it's time to get in there, and probably not. What we're going to do is de-escalate that situation,
Yeah.
not necessarily that person.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
And then
ultimately,
we can plug that term into there.
yeah,
You just unalive somebody and call it de-escalation.
right. So, but really, if you look at it, like I said earlier, the whole officer safety and us saying officer safety, replace that with community safety, and I guarantee there's a pathway to a legitimate explanation. You know what I mean?
The new
So-
buzzword was
Yeah,
just
new
born.
buzzword, community safety. I have to chase somebody because it's keeping the community safer. Now, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I truly mean it. You know what I mean? Like,
That makes sense. Yeah.
if it's something like an active shooter, right? We're not going in there to reason with the person, while the person is actively murdering people.
Yeah.
We're going in there to stop it because we want the community to be safe.
Yeah, no. The fundamental duty is to just safeguard lives and property, right? And the secondary thing would be to try to do that as safely as possible. Like you talk about, like your critique of the going home philosophy.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. It's like that's actually not what you're being paid for. Like,
Our mission is to safeguard
you have the
people
mission,
and
and if you can do that as safe as you can, then great. But
Yeah.
like there's
Now,
something
I will say that with our mission, it's to do it smartly. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
of
Like we're
course.
not willy-nillying, just
course.
trading life for life or anything like
course.
that. So
Yeah, and I just kind of feel like that goes without saying, so I don't even bother saying it. But yeah, there are things that are more important than my life or your life.
no,
I wanted to
absolutely.
I wanted to get a question from the audience before
Question
we
from
get
the
too,
audience.
too far.
In the weeds.
Catch criminals, stop crime, and keep officers safe. Okay, I won't say who said this, but we'll try to just read through it as best we can. Why we can spend a little more time and effort training the cops in hard skills. All of our training effort right now is focused on, I don't want to say that word, and let's just say not hard skills. And I asked for clarification on what hard skills were. He says, actual police tactics and skills that will help catch criminals, stop crime, and keep officers safe.
Okay.
He's more articulate than this. He's had a few, so
Oh, that's all right.
Road sodas.
I like this
Sodas.
question because I absolutely agree. And anybody who's worked on a shift with me has heard me say the same thing, that when you're brand new, get really good at the job, right? be very good at driving a car fast, right? Be very good at shooting your gun, be physically fit, understand how to write a search warrant, understand how to go testify in court, understand how to do gang experts like we were talking about, right? Go be really, really good at that stuff, because when it comes to the leading people later on in your career, having a foundation for that stuff is going to be the best thing that you can do to help connect with people and have those conversations where you show that you know what you're talking about. Now, as far as that question goes, I would say, why can't you have the training? Like, what does it take to train? A couple of dudes and a good idea, right? And a little bit of skill. Go train. Does it have to be something that I set up? I mean, if that's, I don't know that that was the question, but if that's what it has to be, then let me know. We'll bring some more training. And if it's something that the people that are better at it than me can set up, then set it up. Like your team's pretty good. Have you guys provided training for anybody?
Not since I've been, outside the unit. Since
Not that it's your job, you know what I mean? But could you?
We could, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so go do it. I think that
no, I like that answer. I always like when I propose a problem, it's like better
Got
to
it.
have a solution. Like if I have a problem for you, like, hey, well, this is the problem. It's good for me to say, well, this is what I think we should do to fix
Yeah.
it. Instead of just throwing problems out.
I agree, but but this as well as I do, that you're always going to get the problems. You're not necessarily going to get the solutions. So, we talked about it earlier. I know who the question came from, and I have a ton of respect for him. I have a ton of respect for his skill as well.
Yeah.
He's very good at what he does.
Well, he does that on his own.
And that's the key, right? Like departmentally, we're going to, like I talked about earlier, we're going to plug ourselves into that cyclical assessment phase, you know what I mean? And look to see what the problems are, where the gaps are, what we can do to address it. And then we're going to address it, and we're going to play it through and assess again and see where our gaps are. If our gaps are based off of stipulated judgment, or our gaps are based off of what the community's saying, or what the city council's saying, or city management's saying, you can bet your butt it's probably going to be something more along the lines of CIT or why'd you stop me or whatever.
Yes.
Those have a lot of value. They have a lot of value in one aspect, right? When it comes to the hard skills that we're talking about, or the question from the audience was, that's a little bit different. We don't really have a big problem with that stuff. You know what I mean? As apparent in any gaps that show through the process. I'm not saying that people can't be better at it.
You're talking about like measurable data to see that like there's a deficiency here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, which is tough for us, right? Because I can look at a use of force review and say, well, this wasn't good or that wasn't good. And then we go and we provide that person some remediation training, or we send them to a class, or we do whatever. If it is something where in general we're falling below the line, I haven't seen the data that supports that. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that it hasn't been brought up. Now, if it is something that the sergeants, and I truly believe that this is probably what's happening, see that there's a deficiency amongst one of their people or amongst their shift or whatever else, and they pull that person aside and they say, you need to be better at this, and this is what we're going to do. And they go to the range, or they go to the DTAC guys or whoever, and they fix it. Great. That's awesome. It shouldn't be a problem that the chief has to fix. You know what I mean? It shouldn't be a problem that I have to fix if it's easy enough to recognize and correct at the lower level. Now, if it's something that we as a group, we can't shoot and hit our targets, right? Or we're crashing cars all the time, or we are getting, we can't take control of somebody and put them in handcuffs. Those are bigger group problems where we need to probably have some overall training that's going to go and try to address those gaps. So, and like I said, it's a kind of a wishy-washy example, you know what I mean? Because if the problems are big enough, then we should have some more training. And there's never too much training, you know what I mean? If we could train all the time and then go hit a mission, that would be ideal, right? Yeah. We don't have that luxury. We have to deploy our team all the time, and that's where a lot of the
and on that point, I think we at one point were kind of close to having maybe not a solution but a better model for this, and it was implemented, in my opinion, being the good idea fairy that I am, implemented incorrectly.
The training day.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, and I think of. I remember listening. Jocko was talking about this during the 2020 time frame. He had mentioned it. He's talking about how SEAL teams work is that they do a year and a half. They do an 18-month workup for a 6-month deployment.
Yeah.
So they do 75% training for 25% operation.
Yeah.
And he was saying like the police departments are nowhere near that. It's like, and this is true. It's like you get a little bit of training here and there. And a lot of field time with very little like
Training
instruction
time.
and training time. And one of the things that we did for a minute that I think it just got mismanaged is we had the 6 shift model. So we had uh, it was a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They had a day shift, an afternoon, and a midnight shift, and then you had Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, same day, afternoon, midnight
Yeah.
shift. Everyone overlapped on Wednesday, so you had alternating training days.
Yeah. So every other week you
So
get
every
training.
other week you had a whole day of training.
Yeah.
So 1 out of every 8, what is that percentage wise? I'm not a math
Yeah, you're
nerd.
One
getting
out of eight.
26,
20,
26 training days a year.
12.5% of your 12.5% of your time that you're at work is training time.
Yeah.
That's not 75% to 25% like the SEALs do, but we're not SEALs, obviously.
Why do you think
But-
it failed?
It failed in the implementation because once we showed up for those training days, it was like we weren't prepared there wasn't like a training plan in place. It quickly turned, it was like 2 or 3 weeks where we had a syllabus or we had a plan, like this is the topic that we're going to work on. And after that, it was just kind of like,
Yeah.
And I remember an email going out I was a patrol sergeant, email coming to all the patrol sergeants. It was like, hey, can you guys come up with some ideas for training for our training days? And I remember laughing at it, like turning to who my partner was at the time, like, that's not my fucking job. Like
Yeah.
my job is to supervise the patrol shift. We have an entire division, that's dedicated to like training. Like maybe they could come up with the training. And this is one of the times where I felt comfortable being a good idea fairy. Because I'm like, it's like I shouldn't be coming up with the ideas. I don't know, maybe I should, but like we have a whole division for that. Like, can't they just put something together and provide the training? And it just quickly turned into like we would just kind of show up and do whatever. Like, and all of it seemed half-ass and last minute. And like, I think a better use of the time would be, if nothing else, like he was talking about hard skills, we could do every other training day, every other week on every other Wednesday, your training day, you could spend 4 hours, at the range, practicing those skills, 4 hours driving, doing those skills, 4 hours doing defensive tactics, what I mean, like, and you could implement that. And we have that time kind of set aside and built into the schedule. It was just that what we ended up doing was like, it ended up turning into like, another thing after a while, it turned into like, well, we don't have anything for you guys. So just go out there and go
Yeah.
do,
Go 10
go do cop stuff. And so it was a kind of hilarious thing that happened on Wednesdays is that like, we just had all the cops.
Yeah.
Like everywhere. I remember a pursuit happening one time and there were so many cops. It was like everywhere that this car turned, there was like 2 police cars waiting for them. Like
Yeah.
And it's like the suspect was like, what the fuck's going on? It's a Wednesday afternoon. Like, but then like Saturday would roll around and we'd have like 6 fucking people, like which was
Yeah.
for our town, not a lot. Like a
Right.
shift that should have like 18 had like 6.
Yeah. Any process that's designed without structure
Yeah.
is going to fail.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with you. We designed a process without thinking of the structure,
Mhm.
and we didn't have the support for it, and it failed. It's not that it was a bad idea; it
No,
was
I
just
thought
poorly executed.
Again, in hindsight, I think it was a pretty darn good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. There were other problems too, though, because when we split the pie into 6
Yes.
instead of 5,
The
each of those
pieces are
slices got smaller.
Oh,
right
yeah.
now, take that the other way. When we had COVID, all the you know what I'm
Emergency
saying?
shift?
Emergency shifts. We went to 4, and now then we had people everywhere. Granted that was a little bit different time, but when you throw 50 people out on the street, you know what I mean, and
Stuff
in
gets
our
done.
town, you get people who are bored because all the policing is done already.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you get an OIS that happens and you have a billion cops there real quick.
Yeah.
Now, take that training schedule back again and look to see, like, initially we had, okay, well, we could do this and we could do that and we could do that. And we think it out 3, maybe 4 cycles,
Mhm.
right? So 30 to 40 hours of training,
Mhm.
right? But how many hours is training every other week in a year? It's 260 hours, right? So 10 times 26. 260 hours of training is a lot of training.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's not a bad idea. It's great. It's great if we have the structure to do it. If it's not implemented correctly, then we lose faith in the process,
Mhm.
right? Because it's somebody talking to us about, I don't even want to throw names out there,
Yeah.
but you
I
end
know
up with somebody droning on and on for an entire 10-hour training day. And if the training is bullshit, then people lose faith in the training,
Yes.
and that is almost worse than no training at all, is providing bullshit training,
Yeah.
because it just pisses everybody off.
Yeah.
So, and you don't get anything out of it anyway. So I think that it's a good idea. I think that we would like to go back to that. I know that there are plenty of conversations about it. That or there's a 12-hour shift model as well, where there's like a remainder of hours that get banked, and then ultimately I don't know, I think it's every month or so you do an 8 hours of training. But if you think about that, and you think about what our training burdens are right now, aside from like special units and stuff, but our department training burdens in general, we've got AO school, right? Advanced Officer School, that is a post requirement, so a mandate from the state. There's 24 hours every 2 years.
Yeah.
So 24 hours every 2 years, like that's a drop in the bucket when it comes to 260 hours per year, right? So over that same cycle, you've got 520 hours that you could be training. 24 of those are going to be mandated training. So we have to come up with the training for all the other stuff. And it doesn't mean that we can't do it, but anybody who's going to be presenting that training is going to be pulled away from their primary duties, unless it's training division folks. But is there the expertise in the training division to train on all that stuff? Maybe not. I mean, it depends on the topic, right? So it just gets to be a lot more complex the more that you look at it, and it's not a super easy solution. I think that it would be great to go back to something like that if we had the structure in place to support it.
I mean, sort of, and maybe this is oversimplifying, is that I remember during one of the presidential cycles or something, have you ever heard of Andrew Yang? He ran for president and then he ran for like mayor of New York. And he was pushing the idea of he wanted all police officers to be like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belts or something like that, or purple belts, something pretty.
It was blue belts.
Yeah.
At the minimum.
Yeah.
They
And I
should
was
be
like,
trained to that level.
that is a pretty high standard, I would say.
Yeah.
It takes like, for reference, for those who aren't familiar, to become a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt probably takes 1.5 to 2 years of like training at least like 2 days a week, like going to like a 2-hour class 2 days a week for 1.5 years. Then
Google says 1 to 3 years.
there you go.
1.5 to 3 years.
I nailed it. Right on the money, right?
Yeah, you're almost.
That
as
is a
good as Google.
lot to get to that level. So I think that's a little bit high of a bar. But I think the idea, the notion of it is great. I think it's directionally correct, right? And just being a little bit biased, not some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master or anything, but had a little bit of experience with it, and like the ability to manage folks like in a physical confrontation is a lot better if you have that as like a skill set than if you have it not at all.
Yeah.
And I think that. So we're talking about how are we going to come up with all this training? And it's like, well, I think if you just not do just that, but it takes that long, like Nick said, 1.5 to 3 years to get to that level, you could dedicate a shit ton of time to like, we're going to do this for 4 hours every 2 weeks and not even get close to meeting that mark, but like get a lot better. And in order to get a lot better, you have to do it a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the buy-in is like. I know there's a lot of people that would just be like, fuck this, I'm not doing that. Like obviously. So it's complicated.
I've got faces in my mind now.
It's complicated to say the least, but that's a super important, valuable skill that kind of goes along down that road of de-escalation and
Absolutely.
and learning how to use other skills
And filling up that training quotient.
tasing somebody or punching somebody or hitting them with a baton, doing things that are a lot more humanitarian, and a lot of those bad outcomes, those bad uses of force come just from a lack of training. It's very rarely is it like malice on the part of the officer trying to hurt someone. It's like they just don't know how to do it better. They're not competent. And anyways,
Yeah,
that would
I
fill
don't
up a
disagree.
great deal of those hours. And that's just one idea.
Okay, but then like I said, there's structure that has to be involved, right? So do we have the expertise to do it, to train? Maybe. I know we've got some people with a lot of talent, right? My understanding is that we've got at least one black belt. I don't know how many we have. Yeah. But I know that there are some people with some legit talent. Yeah. And not just with jiu-jitsu, but a lot of things with boxing or martial arts.
And I think
like
boxing applies a little bit less because you shouldn't be putting the dukes up in a.
No, but I agree. It's and you and I.
Well, we do have GS, the Gracie Survival Tactics instructors. I don't know if you've taken that class. That class was really good.
I have not taken it.
It was the first time I ever did any type of like actual jiu-jitsu training, and it made me want to join a gym. But then I remembered how much I work, and I don't have fucking time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And where I'm going with this is it takes time to put together a contract, bring in an expert, have a like a lesson plan,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know the
I don't know,
syllabus,
it's
but
like maybe you could pay an outside person or an outside
Yeah.
group to come in
Yeah,
and
we're
provide
actually
that
talking about that
regular
right now.
training or whatever. And I think of this selfishly on my own because like kind of like Nick, I'd like to get back into jujitsu, but it just where do I find the time?
Yeah.
And if the department was like paying me to go, I'd be like super stoked. You know, like if you were paying me to do this thing that I already want to do, so maybe there's a little bit of bias there, me selfishly wanting that.
Yeah.
But I think that there's actual like a great outcome that could be had from implementing that.
Do you think that use of force is our biggest problem right now?
Our biggest? I don't think so. I mean, I like anything, you can get better.
Yeah. Oh,
I think-
absolutely.
I think so. Again, dealing with use of force and supervising and reviewing uses of force, what I see mostly is that like we do. Yeah, our friend Brent gets mad when I use this term. We get this applies to all across the board. We get it mostly right most of the time, and I think that's cool. I think that that's great. But I think that there's times when we get it correct, but we could have done better.
Yeah. Probably more of those times than there
More.
are that we did it great.
Sure. And there's a whole hell of a lot more of those times than like we did it totally terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
We-
yeah.
Well, like occasionally,
Yeah, we do a good
we,
job.
We do a bad job occasionally, but by and large, we do a pretty good job
Right.
that we could have done a little bit better. And I think that we could get closer to that goal through something like that, something like not necessarily jujitsu specifically, like old style Brazilian jiu-jitsu where we put our gis on and we practice like belt and gi chokes. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a little bit down the rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of techniques that are in there that would be super valuable. And that
I would agree. I think that I don't think that use of force is our biggest problem right now, but I do think that having people that are confident and competent in combatives
Mhm.
would go a long way in a lot of different areas as well. So I think that it makes it safer for the officers. It makes it safer for the suspect.
the
and
more
ultimately
skill you have, the
community
less
safety.
violence you're going to commit in that
absolutely.
situation.
Mhm.
100%.
Yep.
Which is kind of counterintuitive. Like you think that this guy is some great badass MMA fighter. He's just going to be out there fucking people up all the time. It's like, actually, no, he's going to not fuck people up because he's going to have the skill and competence to be able to handle it appropriately.
Yeah.
Then let me ask you this. What is the biggest problem?
Ooh, I don't know the
Meaning of life, Ted?
Yeah. I think that I would say that one of our biggest problems is not understanding the value of data. And I realize that sounds like an R2D2 answer, but the reality is that is what drives training. It's what makes us responsive is how well we address which way the data goes, right? And not just what we're collecting, but how we're collecting it, and the I'm sorry, not just what we have collected, but what we're collecting in general, right? So if we're collecting in these 10 categories, if there's 20 categories that we should be collecting in, you know, we're only relying on the 10, then we've got an incomplete picture, right? And so really assessing what it is that we're doing, what we want out of it, and how we're measuring it is, I think, the way of the future for administering what we do as police officers. Yeah.
What kind of data are you talking about?
All of it. Just like professional sports teams, right? They've got so many advanced stats that it's crazy. Like you could be like, oh, this is the best pitcher when the sun's facing over here and throwing left-handed on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like there's stats for stuff like, oh, maybe not that, but you know what I mean? And it's
okay.
The more things that we collect, the more things we can analyze, the more things we can have an informed opinion on. Now, I'm not saying that takes precedence over the job itself, but when it comes to running the business of the police department, it's difficult to do based off of what we feel or what we did when we were there or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we have to build a strategy, we have to build structure, and we have to build a process. And if we don't do that in an informed way, then we end up with a lot of muddy water. You know?
Yeah.
So I think that collecting that data, analyzing that data, and actually developing a trajectory that's informed is something that everybody can get behind, because we don't even, throughout the chain, we don't have just dumb people. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but by and large, we don't have dumb people. You know, just because you're not the chief or you're not a captain or you're not a supervisor,
Oh yeah.
like, they're not children, you know what I mean? Like they understand what's going on and
Yeah.
they can evaluate the information that's being passed to them. And if we do it from a factual and, you know, kind of data-based way, you know, from that perspective, then it's a little bit easier to understand at least what I'm saying. You can throw back to me and say like, well, you didn't account for this or you didn't account for that.
Yeah.
And that's legitimate, right? But if I'm telling you what I did account for, at least now you have some framework to base that opinion to push back on. So it's an
Yes.
informed feedback. You know what I mean? So I don't know if that's necessarily
So we need to
the
get
biggest
better at
problem.
collecting and
Just using
synthesizing
it.
data.
Yeah. Collecting, assessing, synthesizing, all of it. You know, it's
What comes to mind for me is like, and I think I talked with Bagby about this a little bit, is that the early intervention systems and one of my frustrations I had with that as it was being implemented, and they're working on measures to kind of address my complaint. So this is kind of an old complaint that I'll preface by saying it's being addressed, right?
Okay.
But as this initially went into effect, it was like early intervention, and what quality assurance was doing is they would look at like use of force, they would look at pursuits, and they would look at there's all these like high risk behaviors they would look at, and then they would get like evaluated and scrutinized, and then opinions would come back and what they think that should be done about it. And I started getting frustrated with it because I was noticing it was like we had a mechanism in place to identify these high risk behaviors and then to correct if we see an issue or a problem that needs to be corrected. But there wasn't a mechanism on the other end of the spectrum, which is like, if I'm out there doing a lot of stuff, I'm going to get noticed. And if I make some mistakes here and there, those are going to be corrected. Great, fine. But there wasn't a mechanism in place for the other end of the guy that's like, if I'm not really doing anything at all, unless my direct supervisor points that out and notices it, there wasn't like a data collection that is going to pick me off and be like, hey, someone needs to go and pay attention to that guy over there.
right.
So like if I'm a 1 on productivity, no one's ever going to notice unless my supervisor notices and does something. But if I'm a 10 on production, I'm probably going to be setting off some alarm bells with some of these other things, and I'm going to be getting the microscope is going to get put on me. And anyways, so I don't even know where we're going with this, but that came to mind when we talk about data collection. They're trying to implement a process to catch the
we've come
ones.
so far in data collection since QAU and the performance analysis division's been set up with, you know, Brian and Chris and the staff that they have, all the analysts and the officers that are working in there. We're so far beyond where we were even 5 years ago, 6 years ago or so, that it's showing us we're now able to see what we know, but also we're getting into knowing what we don't know. You know what I mean? And so it's opening doors to us, and then it becomes I don't want to say a slippery slope, but it kind of along those lines where it's like where do you rein it in to have a realistic data set? You know what I mean? As opposed to just saying, hey, Travis, I need you to quantify every second that you're on shift, right? I need you to fill out this form every 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like that would give us a ton of data, but it's not realistic, you know? And so trying to balance that with something that's going to be meaningful, it's going to be reasonable, and it's still going to allow us to accomplish the mission while giving us the things that we need to build the metrics that we need to analyze how, you know, what our actual efficacy is. Like that stuff's huge. So, but it sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, and we can't get people to do RIPAs. You know what I mean? And it's like, that is literally an example of how we do this thing that I'm talking about. You know, now that one's maybe a poor example because there's some politics behind it, but but man, if we can't get behind the fact that we've got to quantify what we do, then I don't know. I think that it's a losing battle to not quantify what we do. You know, so anyway, I would say that that's one of the big ones. Getting people to understand the value of that all throughout the chain, right? So understanding as a sergeant how important it is that you adequately and accurately put the different things into your blue team, or that when you're looking at a report, you know, checking that stuff over and being able to explain to an officer, hey, this is the reason that you're doing this detail page. This is the reason that you're doing this thing, or you're doing your taser download, or whatever it is, you know, all the things that are giving us some data. I think that a lot of the officers, unfortunately, not even unfortunately, I looked at it the same way when I was an officer. Like, this is just a way to catch me. It's just a way to catch me doing a thing. Like, sure. You know, if you're doing a thing, you might get caught. Don't do the thing. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing what you need to do, then don't be afraid of explaining it. Don't be afraid of what the data says. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to be some context and some it's kind of nuance to that particular data set.
That kind of reminds me of like all these monitoring systems and everything are going into place, and there's like the body worn camera video reviews and the way that those were generated. I don't know if it's still this way.
Audits.
The audits. So each shift's watch commander was required to do like 2 audits, I think, per shift per week, something like that. And they plug the information, they punch it in, and then the Axon spits out like 2 videos. They put in the time frame and for the shift, whatever, and it gives them 2 randomly selected videos. But the videos at this time, again, I don't know if it's this way, if it just completely random, there's a chance you might catch as a watch commander, you might get like a complex like sexual assault investigation. And that's going to be a 3-hour long video. And if the expectation is for you to sit there and watch every second of that 3-hour long video, like that's a huge chunk of your day. So the way they worked for this was finagled it was only spitting out videos that were 5 minutes or less. So that way they're not having to review these real long ones. They're just reviewing these real short ones. Well, real quick, the officers figured that out. And then like what would happen is if as an officer, you mess something up on the procedure of how you're supposed, there's a lot of rules and things, way that the body cams are supposed to be done, right? If you mess something up procedurally and you knew you had made a mistake, you knew that if you just let the thing continue to run past the 5-minute mark, that the video wasn't going to get randomly selected for the audit process. So like if you didn't have it in standby for the full 1 minute prior to activating it, and you knew that, like, well, if I just let this thing keep going, until I'm done, let it go for 6 minutes and then turn it off, like nobody's going to audit it, you know, or if you improperly muted or whatever it was, you know. And I think like, I don't know, again, I keep doing this where I don't remember what the original question or point was, but like.
No, I think that your point is sound, that there's always going to be workarounds.
There's workarounds and there's
if, and I'll go back to what I've said a couple times, if our structure doesn't support our process, then the process is probably going to fail at some point. If we're doing a thing just to do the thing and it doesn't serve our purpose or our mission or help enhance those things, then it's probably not going to be a thing that too many people can get behind. So with that in particular situation, I don't know. I would hope that people are not just circumventing it because they don't want to get caught doing a thing, right? Like I think that's baby stuff. It is baby stuff spectrum of things, right? Like if you get caught doing a thing and the supervisor sees it and they're doing what they're supposed to do, then they'll address it and it'll be done. It'll be done right there. It won't be something that the lieutenant has to see or whatever, because when the lieutenant sees it, they're going to say, "Hey, Sarge, what happened with this?" And you're going to say, "Oh, I already handled it by doing this." And it's like, "Oh, all right, done deal. Don't even have to worry about it," you know?
Yeah. But that thing, kind of like what you said, like the baby stuff, that's kind of like what Harley said earlier, like because the watch commander who's far removed, they look small. Kind of like you right now, it looks small, but to the officer, it's the big thing. Because it matters to them, because then they are quote unquote failing an audit, and that doesn't feel good, regardless if they, did something wrong or something messed up, or they flubbed it, they turned it off, they hit the restroom and then they turned it on really quick. And that automatically becomes a failure. And
then they're going to get assigned the training. They get assigned
the training, which right now, I'm sorry to say this, is on the body cam 2 when we use the body cam 3.
It's not even for the camera that we currently use.
So and that's still in place right now, and it's frustrating, and I heard a lot of people bitch about that all the time.
And how long does the training take to do?
It takes a long time.
Like 10 minutes or
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah. I bet it was designed that way.
And then there's also like the progressive discipline, right?
Yes.
That goes with that. So like if I know that if I mess this one up this time, like not that big of a deal, but like if I messed up 3 more after that, at some point there's going to be some much more serious consequences. And it's like, well, why not let the thing run for an extra couple of minutes, like just so that I don't catch that. I don't have to do that 30 minutes of training. And I'm not advocating for this. I'm just thinking in the way that my own personal criminal mind always works. It's like, how am I going to get out of the thing or, subvert the thing and whatever.
Well, this is the same podcast that we talked about, right, is the right thing to do, right? Like, I think you guys have other episodes where we're talking about like just being morally right and all that. So where I'm going with this is I agree that it doesn't feel good to get in trouble. I've
Yeah.
been in trouble. I've been written up. I've gotten written up. I've been suspended. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't agree with any of those things, and I didn't like those things when they happened. I felt bad when every one of those things happened, being skipped on lists, things like that. Like, it's not fun. You know, there was a reason for it, and whether I agreed with it or not doesn't change the fact that there was a reason. I didn't agree with the reason. I didn't agree with the solution that other people came up with, but ultimately, I didn't mess those things up too many times in a row. You know what I mean? So if we're using our corrective measures, i.e. discipline or remedial training or whatever, if we're using them effectively, then we minimize the recurrence of those things.
Yeah.
Right. So if we keep screwing something up, it should probably get caught so that we can say, hey, quit screwing that thing up.
Yeah,
You know what I
figure
mean?
out a way
Be
to
better
screw
at
it up.
this thing, right?
Yeah.
Go
No, and I
get the
agree.
hard skills that you need.
And I agree organizationally, that's the measure that should take place. I'm just telling you from like individual selfish perspective when I'm like, well, I got to kind of also look out for myself. And this is the things that I'm going to do. And if I'm taking that perspective,
Yeah,
and I'm not advocating for doing that.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I mean, yes, we're all in different spots right now. We've all been through some of the same spots. And, you know, like I said, I didn't like getting in trouble for things. I didn't, you know, I don't like having to explain myself, but you start doing it more and more and you just understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, you get better at it.
understand it better. And so, but I
And
go
it
with
shouldn't
that.
be a recurring problem. If it's recurring multiple times over and over and over again, then yeah, there needs to be.
And if there is a solid team that's that person is working with, then hopefully they help fix it. You know what I mean? Because it should be something where it's not, hey, you know, I come to you and I'm like, hey, I did this, and you're just like, hey, just let it run another minute and you're gonna be fine. It should be something where it's like, well, dummy,
don't do
like
that.
fix it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like be better. And it shouldn't be there should not be a stigma with being less than. It should be something where we all want to be better, right? Like if it's that 1% improvement on one thing, you know, and ultimately after 100 things, we're 100% better, right?
Yeah.
So there's opportunities there, but it goes back to the messaging, and it's like, are we going to, you know, if I come to you and you get defensive over me to the process, and now the process is you're throwing some toxicity for the process in there to me, and then I look at it like, I don't need to get better. I just need to run my shit a little bit longer so that nobody catches it, because this is a bullshit process, right? And if that's the message that I get, then and that's a reasonable solution to me, then how good am I going to impress? Yeah, am I going to make myself better? Probably not, you know?
Yeah. And again, I like to clarify for anyone out there, I'm not advocating for subverting the process and
I know you're not. I
just
know
think
you're
of
not.
when these, I was just,
well, the
give an
reality
example of
is
how
that we're going to
people-
do things the most efficient way, right? The easiest way.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't like getting in trouble. We don't like negative reinforcement.
I mean, that's the
None of
reason
us
why
do.
they do the 5 minutes. Is because it's
Say that one more time.
That's the reason why they do the 5 minute BWC length. It's because it's easy.
Well, it's so that we can get the amount of things that we need to get so that it is as close to statistically viable as possible. I still don't, you'd have to talk to Chris or Brian. I still don't think we're hitting it with the numbers that we have, but the bigger the group is that we're auditing, compared, you know, the ratio between that and the overall group that we have, then it makes it much more likely that we're catching the problems that we actually have in the big group. Right.
Here's
That
a potential solution, since no one just proposed problems. Maybe they could make it that the OIC is responsible for reviewing X amount of minutes per week instead of X amount of videos. And then you could allocate that into their schedule. So it's like, okay, you're responsible for 2 hours of video per week or whatever, and you'll do it during this time.
Yeah.
And then let it spit that out. That way you don't have that workaround.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, how much are you really capturing in a 5-minute video anyways? Like, you don't really.
I think that's probably the $64,000 question.
Yeah. So like that's what I would say. It's like you probably want
Again,
to review.
if we're doing a thing just to say that we're doing a thing, it's probably not going to last long, or at
Yeah.
least be received well.
what kind of things are officers doing in 5 minutes that they're auditing?
Yeah, like a subject stop or
traffic stop.
Traffic stop. Yeah.
Something
They're
very
real quick
menial.
in and out.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of failures on those.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
that
there's not a lot of failures because there's not a lot of failing activity, and also because there's a workaround to prevent yourself from getting the failure.
yeah.
so
See,
so yeah.
you guys get it.
Don't work around your BWC
Don't work
audit.
around it,
Yeah,
That's our official stance.
That is our official
Yeah.
stance.
Yeah.
And it's like I said,
Follow the
it's
policy.
important. Like the you know, when when BWCs were becoming a thing and we first started having to wear them, I didn't like it either.
Mhm.
You know, nobody likes having Big Brother, you know, sitting there like having a camera that's in your face the entire time, having to be careful of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. Right now, I have to be careful of what I'm saying
Mm.
because I don't want to come across, you know, with as Ted King's opinion being bigger than my position's opinion.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But the reality of it is that it has been a very good thing for us, you know, and there are
100%. Yeah.
so many officers that have been cleared of wrongdoing
Mhm.
with zero doubts because we were able to look at it and be like, that did not happen.
Mhm.
100% that did not happen.
Yep.
And people probably don't understand the frequency that members of the public come in and make these just completely unvalidated
Mhm.
claims against the police department.
I understand. It happens a lot.
So you do because you
Yeah.
received a lot of those. But looking at those and I can tell you, like it actually feels good to see, like, well, here's the allegations and here's the thing, and you know, here's the involved people, and then I go and I watch the video and it's like, there's absolutely none of that. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, not only were they not doing the things they shouldn't be doing, but they were doing all of these other things great.
Hmm.
You know, and it's super easy. It's super, like, I don't know that we quantify it as well as we probably could, but it's one of those things that
Messaging.
that it's refreshing for somebody whose purpose is behind a desk at this point. It's refreshing to see the great work that our folks do,
Mhm.
you know, and to be able to see it from as close to the perspective that they're seeing it as we can reasonably do.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of value in that. So I would say that anybody who's trying to circumvent that is really just undermining themselves. So
Yeah. I agree.
but then again, I don't have to wear one all the time. So it's easy for me to talk about it without having that experience, you know.
That's true. The farther away you are from something, the
Yeah.
smaller it is. Why don't you talk to us then about or wanted to get into Alpha Safety Solutions.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've got so Bobby Woolard, Captain Bobby, well, I think you can say his whole name.
He's
He's
okay
been
with
on
it.
here a couple of times, right?
Yeah.
He and I have a company that is a safety consulting company, and it's called Alpha Safety Solutions. We started it back in 2019, and we do a lot of just in general safety consulting for businesses, vulnerability assessments, workplace violence training, things like that.
Mhm.
And then we also, on the other side of the house, do concealed weapon training.
Nice.
So we're one of the vendors that are here locally. There's a lot of good vendors that are here locally, and I think, you know, Ronnie and Danny, and you know, there's a lot of guys that do some really good work. And anyway, we're vendors that provide that portion of the training in the process to receive your CCW permit. So it keeps us busy. That's we end up the business has grown pretty good. We're traveling around the country now and doing some training. So it's a good time.
Cool. If somebody's interested in were you saying something? Sorry.
No.
What how do we find you? How do we find the company? What's the
Yeah, the Google machine. Yeah, our web address is www.alphasafetysolutions.com.
that's straightforward enough.
Pretty straightforward. You can also find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and the like at Alpha Safety Solutions. info@alphasafetysolutions.com is our email address. So
Okay.
pretty much Alpha Safety Solutions. You Google that and you're gonna find us. So,
We'll link to it in our description for this video. So
I appreciate it.
Anyone who's interested, go ahead and check out that link and get you some CCW training, some active shooter training for your business.
yeah. We've done stuff for police. We've done stuff for private business. It's a good time. So we do a lot of speaking at conferences and spending a lot of our money and donating a lot of our money to different things. So I wouldn't say it's a money maker, but I would say that it's afforded us some different opportunities to see different folks and interact with some different businesses. So yeah, I think any of that stuff, as we bring it back to the police department, it's kind of cool to see how different businesses run and our safety posture, you know what I mean? And kind of what, like safety and accessibility are pretty much mutually exclusive when it comes to physical security. And so, developing the posture that's right for the individual business is, it's unique to them, right? So you say a church, right? They're super accessible and by design, not super safe. You know what I mean? As far as physical security goes. So what their mitigation steps look like is a little bit different than what, say, a prison would be, right?
Yeah.
Not very accessible, but pretty safe, physically speaking.
Mhm.
So anyway, just figuring out like helping people find where that balance is for them based off of their business and how accessible they need to be, and then bringing in some realistic steps to their physical security and things like that. Just it's a good time.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome. Well,
plus
if you guys
it's-
are
what's that?
you guys are interested out there, check out Alpha Safety. And
Yeah, it's always interesting when people are like, well, what if I do this? What if I use this level of lethal force? You know what I mean? Or this type of lethal force? And having investigated those types of crimes, it's pretty easy to say, well, this is a situation that I've had, or a
Yeah.
version of that situation, and being able to give people some guidance that's in line with what the courts say and all that. It's been something that we found has some not just monetary value, but some legitimate value when it comes to
Yeah,
helping
because people
out.
don't know.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're just a typical
Yeah,
person not paying super
You
close
get what
attention.
you know from TV,
Yep.
then you're probably going to know a bunch of special effects and baloney, but you get what you know from the people that investigate that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little bit more closer to the truth. So
Nice.
I got one last question for you. Since right now you're in charge of training, right?
Mhm.
What do you think are like the top 3 hard or soft skill that a patrol officer should train more of?
So, okay. So if it's a patrol officer that's not looking at promotion or anything like that, like a brand new patrol officer, first 3 years on the job, I think be very good at driving, be very good at report writing, be very good at shooting, be physically fit. I don't think that, in my opinion, and I realize that there's a lot of difference with this. I don't want them to worry about leadership, right? I don't want them to go to like an assertive leadership course or anything like that. That's downstream stuff. Focus on how good you can be as an individual first, because it's going to make you a better leader down the road. So if you can't do those things, you can't understand the X's and O's of the play, then when you're calling the shots, it's you're going to have some gaps. You know what I mean? So I would say that any of those hard skills, like the audience wanted to know about, focus on that stuff first, and just be really, really good at the basic things that we're requiring of our officers, because it's never going to change that we're going to send our officers out to do dangerous things, and we need you to be able to do those dangerous things very, very well.
Cool. Sounds good.
I think that was more than 3 things, but
It was 4, but
it was 4.
who's counting?
Yeah.
We'll take it.
I'm a captain. I can I'll just add more.
We won't make you throw another out. You can keep all 4. Yeah. You got anything else? You got anything else you want to add?
I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. I know that it's a little bit different format. I actually like the format that you've gone to with a couple of these, where it's less about the stories. I find those entertaining.
Less wiener jokes.
Yeah. I find those entertaining, but I think that I think the value in the content is, like, you guys have so much influence and so much just valuable perspective that when it comes to actually communicating the stuff that is what I feel is important, I think you guys do a great job, and I think that this is a great kind of medium for that. I appreciate you letting me be part of it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll have to come back and do it again.
Fine.
All right.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and stay frosty.